Hey there, and welcome to Crime for Sleep. I know you're having trouble falling asleep, so let me keep you company with true crime stories from around the world. Before we dive in, I'm curious, where did you first hear this one? If you enjoy these stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Now get comfortable, and let's get into tonight's case. Crime 1. When I moved in, I didn't question the 4 deadbolts on the basement door. Maybe the previous owner was paranoid, but last week I found a 5th lock added overnight. Same model, same rust pattern, but I didn't install it. The weird part, it was locked from the inside. I stood there for a while, hand trembling on the knob, listening. Something on the other side scratched, slow and steady, like it wanted out. I should have called someone right then. Instead, I did what any reasonable person would do. I convinced myself there was a logical explanation. The real estate agent had mentioned the previous owner was eccentric, a retired contractor who lived alone for decades before passing away peacefully in his sleep. Natural causes, they said, nothing suspicious. The scratching stopped when I knocked on the door. Complete silence followed, the kind that makes your ears ring. I pressed my face against the cold wood, trying to hear breathing, movement, anything. The basement had always smelled strange, not musty like you'd expect, but sweet and chemical, like cleaning products mixed with something organic I couldn't identify. That smell got stronger as I stood there. The next morning I called the real estate company. The agent sounded confused when I described the locks. She insisted only 3 had been mentioned in the property inspection, not 4, definitely not 5. When I pressed her for details about the previous owner, her voice shifted, professional but careful. His name had been removed from most documents, she explained. Family request, privacy concerns. But she could tell me he'd been a meticulous man, someone who documented everything. The house had been sold with most of his belongings still inside, boxes and boxes of papers the family hadn't wanted to deal with. I found those boxes that afternoon, stacked neatly in the upstairs closet I'd been using for storage, each one labeled in precise handwriting with dates going back 30 years. The ink had faded on the older labels, but the writing remained perfectly legible, almost obsessive in its neatness. The first box contained receipts, thousands of them organized by month and year. Hardware store purchases dominated the collection: locks, bolts, chains, security cameras, motion sensors. The quantities seemed excessive for a single person who needs 15 deadbolts delivered in 1 month. But it was the installation dates that made my skin crawl. Each receipt had a handwritten note on the back: installed basement door, added second lock basement door, reinforced basement door frame. The dates spanned 5 years, showing a gradual escalation from basic security to something approaching fortress-level protection. I kept digging through the boxes, my hands growing more unsteady with each discovery. There were photographs, dozens of them, showing the basement door's evolution. The first images showed a standard wooden door with a single lock. Gradually, the door became metal, then reinforced metal, then something that looked more like a vault entrance than a residential basement access. In the final photographs, I counted 6 locks, not 5, 6. The last photo was different. Instead of showing the door itself, it captured what looked like scratch marks on the inside surface, deep gouges in the metal, as if something with claws had been trying to get out. The photo was dated just 3 months before the previous owner's death. I needed air. The sweet chemical smell seemed to be following me through the house now, stronger in some rooms than others. When I opened the windows, it didn't help. The smell wasn't coming from outside. That evening I sat in my kitchen with the photograph spread across the table, trying to make sense of what I'd found. The scratching started again around midnight, slow, methodical, like someone or something testing the strength of the door. I grabbed a flashlight and headed downstairs. The basement door looked exactly as it had when I'd first seen it, except now I knew its high crime. 5 deadbolts gleamed in the flashlight beam, their metal surfaces showing no signs of recent installation, despite my certainty that the 5th lock had appeared overnight. Maybe I'd miscounted. Maybe the stress of moving had made me paranoid. But the scratching was real. It came from directly behind the door at about chest height. I touched the metal surface where the sound seemed strongest, and it was warm. Not room temperature warm, body temperature warm. I should have walked away then, should have packed my things and left that same night. Instead, I went back upstairs and called the previous owner's family. The woman who answered spoke in whispers as if someone might be listening. Yes, she said, her father had been obsessive about home security in his final years. No, she couldn't explain why. He'd stopped talking to family members who asked too many questions about his basement renovations. But there was something else, she admitted after a long pause. Her father had left behind audio recordings. Hours and hours of them, documenting what he claimed were disturbances in the house. The family had never listened to all of them, too disturbing, too personal. But if I was living there now, maybe I should know. She agreed to send me copies. The recordings arrived 2 days later on a dozen old cassette tapes, each one labeled with dates and times. I started with the earliest tape, dated 5 years before the owner's death. His voice sounded younger, more confident. Recording number 1. Something is living in my basement. I can hear it moving around down there, but every time I check, there's nothing. I'm going to start documenting everything. The recordings progressed chronologically, showing his growing obsession and fear. By the 3rd tape, he was installing multiple locks. By the 5th, he was sleeping in different rooms each night, convinced that whatever was in the basement was learning his routines. But it was tape number 9 that changed everything. The old man's voice had become shaky, uncertain. I made a mistake. I thought something was trying to get into my basement, but I was wrong. Something is trying to get out, and I think I know what it is. The recording cut off there. Tape number 10 was mostly silence, broken only by the sound of the old man crying. Tape 11 contained just breathing, ragged, frightened breathing that went on for an hour. The final tape was different. The old man's voice was calm again, eerily peaceful. I understand now. I've been feeding it. Every time I checked the locks, every time I went down there, I was giving it what it wanted, attention, fear. It's been growing stronger, and now it's almost ready. The scratching isn't random, it's counting down. When it stops, that's when I'll know it's time. The recording ended with the sound of footsteps walking downstairs, keys jingling, and multiple locks clicking open. That was 3 months before his death. I turned off the tape player and sat in the darkness of my living room, processing what I'd heard. The official cause of death had been natural causes, heart failure in his sleep. But what if that wasn't the whole crime? What if the old man had finally opened that door? The scratching started again, but this time it sounded different, more urgent, more purposeful. I counted the scratches, groups of 5, repeated over and over, like someone marking time, keeping score, or sending a message. I grabbed the flashlight and went downstairs one more time. The basement door stood exactly as before, but now I noticed something I'd missed. The 5th lock, the one that had appeared overnight, wasn't quite aligned with the others. It was positioned slightly higher, as if installed by someone taller than the previous owner. Someone like me. I checked my pockets and found keys I didn't remember having. 5 keys, each one fitting perfectly into the 5 locks on the door, but I had never made copies of these keys, had never even seen the original keys. My hands moved without conscious thought, inserting each key and turning them one by one. Click, 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 click. The door swung open on silent hinges, revealing a basement that wasn't quite what I'd expected. It was clean, organized, and completely empty except for a single chair positioned in the center of the room. On the chair sat an old cassette player and one final tape labeled simply, "For the next owner." I picked up the tape with trembling fingers and pressed play. The old man's voice filled the basement, but he wasn't speaking to his recordings this time. He was speaking directly to me. "If you're hearing this, then it worked. You found the keys, you opened the locks, and now you're standing where I stood. The scratching will stop now, but only for a while. It's your turn to feed it, your turn to listen, your turn to add locks and make recordings and wait for the next person to move in." The tape continued. "You'll try to leave, but you won't be able to. Not really. Part of you will always be drawn back to this basement, to this door, to this responsibility. The thing behind the walls needs a caretaker, someone to maintain the locks and document its presence. The previous owners understood this eventually. Now it's your turn to understand." I looked around the empty basement, my flashlight beam dancing across clean concrete walls. No scratches, no damage, no signs of anything living or trapped. But as I stood there, I began to hear something new, not scratching this time, but breathing. Slow, steady breathing that seemed to come from inside the walls themselves. The old man's voice on the tape grew fainter. The scratching was never something trying to get out. It was something calling to you, teaching you the rhythm, preparing you to take over. And now that you've opened the door, now that you've heard the truth, you can't pretend you don't know. The responsibility is yours now. The recordings are yours to make. The locks are yours to maintain. I turned off the tape player and stood in the silence of the basement. Above me, I could hear my own footsteps walking across the floor, checking the locks on the basement door from the other side. But that was impossible. I was standing in the basement. Unless I wasn't the only one in the house anymore. The breathing in the walls grew louder, more insistent. I looked up at the basement ceiling and realized the truth that the old man had discovered too late. The scratching had never been coming from something trapped in the basement. It had been coming from something trapped in the house itself. And now, with the basement door standing open, that something finally had what it had been waiting for all along. Not escape, but company. Crime 2, I bought it secondhand from a moving sale. The cushions were lumpy, but I figured that was just wear. One day I unzipped the lining out of curiosity. There was fabric sewn inside, too clean, too new. I cut through it and reached in. My fingers brushed something cold and hard. I pulled out a burner phone wrapped in gauze and dried blood. 10 missed calls, no texts, but the call log had my number. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. My number appeared 17 times over the past 3 months. Incoming calls, each lasting between 30 seconds and 4 minutes. I had no memory of receiving any of them. The phone felt heavier than it should have, like it was pulling me down into the couch cushions. The woman who sold me the furniture had nervous hands. She kept ringing them while we talked about the price. Her husband stood behind her saying nothing, but his eyes followed my every movement. When I asked why they were selling everything, she said they were relocating for work. But there were no boxes, no moving trucks scheduled, just furniture scattered across their front lawn with handwritten price tags. I drove back to their house that evening. The lawn was empty, but the lights were on. Through the window, I could see them sitting at a bare table, not eating, not talking, just sitting. The husband noticed me first. He stood up slowly and walked to the window. We looked at each other for a long moment before he closed the curtains. The burner phone had one saved contact, home. I pressed call and listened to it ring. After 5 rings, my own voicemail picked up, my voice cheerful and unsuspecting, asking the caller to leave a message. I hung up and tried again, same result. The phone was calling my personal number, but somehow the calls were going to voicemail without my phone ever ringing. I checked my phone records online. There were no missed calls from unknown numbers, no record of any incoming calls during the times shown on the burner phone. It was as if these conversations had happened in a parallel reality where I answered but never knew it. That night I placed both phones side by side on my nightstand. At exactly 2 a.m, the burner phone rang. I watched my personal phone remain silent and dark. The caller ID showed home again. I answered. "You found it," a voice said. It was distorted, like it was being filtered through water. "I was wondering when you would." "Who was this?" "You know who this is. You've been answering my calls for months." I hung up and turned off the burner phone, but the conversation felt familiar, like I'd had it before. The rhythm of the words, the pauses, even my own responses seemed rehearsed. I went to my kitchen and made coffee, trying to shake the feeling that I was following a script I'd memorized without realizing it. The next morning, I called the phone company. They had no record of a secondary line registered to my address, no unusual activity on my account. The technician I spoke with sounded confused when I described the situation. He suggested I might be experiencing some kind of interference, but his explanation fell apart when I mentioned the dried blood. I returned to the house where I'd bought the couch. A for sale sign now stood on the lawn. The neighbor told me the couple had moved out 3 days ago. No forwarding address. They'd left in the middle of the night, taking only what they could carry. The rest of their furniture was still inside. I convinced the real estate agent to let me walk through the house. The rooms were empty except for dust outlines where furniture had stood. In the living room, there was a dark stain on the carpet where the couch had been. The agent explained that the previous owners had mentioned a plumbing leak, but the stain didn't look like water damage. It looked like something had soaked through the floor and dried. That evening, I unwrapped the gauze from around the burner phone. The blood had dried into brown flakes that crumbled when I touched them. Underneath, I found a small key. It was the kind used for safety deposit boxes, with a number etched into the metal, 247. I spent the next 2 days visiting every bank in the area. None of them had a record of box 247 being rented by anyone matching my description or the description of the couple who'd sold me the couch. But at the 4th bank, the clerk paused when I showed her the key. She excused herself and returned with a manager. "This key is from our old location," he said. "We closed that branch 2 years ago. All the boxes were supposed to be emptied and the contents returned to the owners." "What happened to the unclaimed boxes?" "They were moved to a storage facility. We sent notices, but some people never responded." He gave me the address of the storage facility. The building was a converted warehouse on the outskirts of town, surrounded by chain-link fence and security cameras that hadn't worked in years. The manager, there was a woman with tired eyes who looked like she'd been answering questions she didn't want to answer for a very long time. "Box 247, she said, checking her records. "That one's been paid for in advance. Cash payments made every 6 months. The person who rented it never gave a real name, just signed as tenant." She led me to a small room filled with metal boxes. Box 247 was in the back corner, covered in dust. The key turned easily, but the box felt empty when I lifted it. Inside there was only a single item, a photograph of me taken from across the street from my house. I was bringing in groceries, unaware that someone was watching. On the back of the photograph, someone had written, "The calls will stop when you remember what you did." I drove home with the photograph on the passenger seat, face down. The handwriting looked familiar, but I couldn't place it. My hands were shaking when I parked in my driveway. I sat in the car for a long time, staring at my house, trying to remember who might have taken the picture and when. The burner phone was ringing when I walked inside. I'd left it on the kitchen counter, and now it was vibrating against the granite, the sound echoing through the empty house. I picked it up and saw my own number on the caller ID. "I remember now," I said when I answered. "Tell me what you remember." "I remember the couch. I remember why you had to get rid of it." "Keep going." "I remember the blood. I remember helping you clean it up." "And I remember forgetting. I remember you making me forget." The line went dead. I set the phone down and walked to my living room, where the second-hand couch sat in the corner, its cushions still lumpy, still hiding secrets I'd helped bury. I unzipped the lining again and reached inside, past where I'd found the phone, into the deeper recesses of the furniture. My fingers found something else wrapped in gauze, something that felt like bone, something that would explain why the couple had looked so nervous when they sold me the couch, something that would explain why I'd been calling myself, trying to remember what I'd agreed to forget. I pulled my hand back without unwrapping it. Some truths are too heavy to carry, even when they belong to you. The burner phone started ringing again, but this time I didn't answer. This time I let it go to voicemail, wherever that was, in whatever reality I'd been living in for the past 3 months. The couch sits in my living room still. I've stopped sitting on it, but I haven't gotten rid of it either. Sometimes I hear it creaking in the middle of the night, settling under the weight of what's hidden inside. And sometimes, when I'm almost asleep, I hear my own voice coming from somewhere deep within the cushions, having conversations I don't remember, making promises I can't keep, burying secrets that refuse to stay buried. Crime 3, I don't keep cleaning supplies in the bedroom, so the scent didn't make sense. It wasn't faint either, it burned the nose. I opened the closet expecting a spill, but everything looked clean, too clean. The walls were freshly painted, only the closet nowhere else. And when I moved the shoe rack, I found a cut-out square in the floorboards. Beneath it, a tarp. Under the tarp, teeth. Dozens of them, all adult. I had inherited this house from my aunt just weeks before. She'd lived here alone for 30 years, never married, rarely spoke to family. The neighbors said she was quiet, kept to herself. When she died, everyone assumed it was peaceful. Natural causes, they said, old age catching up. I called the police that first day, my hands shaking as I held the phone. They came, documented everything, bagged the teeth. The detective assigned to the case was professional but distant. He asked the usual questions about my aunt, about the house, about when I'd last seen her. I answered honestly. I barely knew her. The teeth were sent for analysis. Dental records would take time, they said. Weeks, maybe months, but I couldn't wait. I couldn't sleep in that house knowing what I'd found. So I started digging into my aunt's life, searching for answers she'd never given while alive. Her bedroom drawers revealed nothing unusual. Bills, medications, reading glasses. But in her desk I found a notebook filled with addresses. Dozens of them all local. Some were crossed out in red ink. Others had question marks beside them. At the bottom of each page she'd written single words: confirmed, doubtful, relocated. I visited the first address on the list, a small apartment building where the landlord remembered my aunt. She'd come by regularly, asking about tenants who'd moved out suddenly. Always polite, he said, but persistent. She claimed to be looking for old friends who'd lost touch. The second address led to a house where the current owner had lived for just 2 years. The previous resident, an elderly man, had disappeared without notice, left everything behind. The owner had tried to contact him, but gave up when the mail kept being returned. Pattern by pattern, I traced my aunt's notebook. Nearly every address corresponded to someone who'd vanished, not dramatically, not violently, just quietly, leaving behind confusion and unpaid rent and worried neighbors who eventually stopped asking questions. The police weren't interested in my research. Missing persons cases were different from whatever they'd found in my aunt's closet. People disappeared for all sorts of reasons, the detective explained. Most of them didn't want to be found. But I kept going, I had to. In my aunt's basement, I found more notebooks, years of them. Names, dates, detailed observations about people's routines. She'd been watching them, learning their patterns. When they left for work, when they returned, who visited them, who didn't. The handwriting grew shakier in the later notebooks. Her observations became more fragmented, paranoid. She wrote about people following her, about being watched in return. The final entry, dated just days before her death, was different from the others. They know I know, but they don't know about the insurance. I searched the house again, looking for anything that might explain that last entry. In the attic, behind boxes of old photographs, I found a metal filing cabinet. Inside were insurance policies, life insurance taken out on dozens of people, all the same company, all listing my aunt as the beneficiary. The policies were legal, properly executed. My aunt had been patient, building relationships with lonely people, earning their trust. They'd named her as their beneficiary, probably grateful for the attention, the care she seemed to provide, and then they disappeared. I brought everything to the police, the notebooks, the policies, the addresses. This time they listened. They reopened investigations into the missing persons cases. They searched the house more thoroughly, bringing in specialists with ground-penetrating radar. They found more, not just in the closet, but throughout the property. Beneath the garden, under the back porch, in the crawl space. Pieces of people who'd trusted my aunt, who'd been alone enough to let her into their lives. The detective told me they'd identified 7 victims so far, all elderly, all isolated, all with substantial life insurance policies. My aunt had been systematic, careful. She'd chosen people who wouldn't be missed quickly, who'd seem to have simply moved away when they stopped appearing in their usual places. But something had changed in her final months. The notebook entries suggested she'd grown paranoid, suspicious that someone was investigating her. She'd become careless or maybe just tired. The last victim hadn't been properly disposed of, hadn't been reported as missing. Someone had been asking questions. I found out who when I visited the insurance company. A claims investigator had been looking into the pattern of payouts to my aunt. Too many deaths, too many beneficiary claims. He'd been building a case, gathering evidence. The investigator had disappeared 3 months before my aunt's death. His car was found abandoned, but he was never located. My aunt's final notebook entry suddenly made sense. She'd known he was closing in, and she'd done what she always did with problems that threatened her. But this time it had been too much. The stress, the paranoia, the weight of what she'd been doing for decades. Her heart had given out just days after making that final entry. Natural causes, the coroner had ruled, and technically he'd been right. I sold the house as soon as the police released it. I couldn't bear to keep it, knowing what had happened within those walls. The new owners tore it down, built something modern and bright. But I drive by sometimes, and I can still smell the bleach when the wind blows just right. The case officially remains open. 7 confirmed victims, but my aunt's notebooks suggest there might have been more. Earlier victims from before she'd started keeping such detailed records. People who disappeared so completely that no one even remembered to miss them. I think about them sometimes, about how easy it was for my aunt to make people disappear, to erase them so thoroughly that their absence became normal. How she'd built a life on the loneliness of others, on their desperate need for connection. The insurance money was never collected. The policies were voided once the fraud was discovered. My aunt's estate was frozen, tied up in legal proceedings that continue to this day. Her victims' families, those who could be found, are seeking restitution. But money can't bring back the dead, can't undo decades of calculated murder. The investigator's body was never found. His case remains unsolved, though everyone knows what happened to him. Sometimes I wonder if he's still out there, buried somewhere in my aunt's meticulous network of hiding places. Another victim of her need for control, for security, for the insurance that came with other people's deaths. I kept one of her notebooks, the earliest one I could find from 30 years ago. The handwriting is different, younger, more confident. She'd been planning this for a long time, learning from each victim, perfecting her methods. The first entry is just a single line: loneliness is the perfect opportunity. I read it sometimes, trying to understand how someone becomes what my aunt became. But the more I read, the more I realized that understanding might be the most dangerous thing of all. Because once you see how easy it is, how simple it would be to make someone disappear, you can't unsee it. The closet still smells like bleach in my memories. That sharp, burning scent that promised cleanliness but delivered only horror. It's a smell I'll never forget, a reminder that the people we trust most might be the ones we should fear. Crime 4, he always followed me everywhere, loyal and curious. But when I stepped into the guest room, he planted his feet, growled, and backed away. I laughed it off until he started whining at night, staring at that door. I tried carrying him inside once. He snapped at me, something he'd never done before. I left the door open that night. In the morning, it was shut tight, and the dog wouldn't stop shaking. That's when I decided to investigate what my brother had left behind. The house had been empty for months before I inherited it. My brother was gone, and I was the only one left to sort through his belongings. The guest room had remained untouched since his disappearance. Everyone assumed he'd walked away from his debts, his problems, his life. But the dog's behavior made me wonder if there was more to discover. I started with the obvious places. Dresser drawers revealed nothing unusual: old clothes, forgotten receipts, a few family photographs. The closet held winter coats that still carried his scent, musty and familiar. But underneath a loose floorboard near the window, my fingers found something unexpected: a small metal box, locked and surprisingly heavy. The key was taped beneath his desk drawer. Inside the box, I found things that didn't belong to the brother I thought I knew. Police reports, photocopied and highlighted, newspaper clippings about missing persons cases, names and addresses written in his handwriting with notes in the margins that made my skin crawl. Watched her for weeks, always alone on Thursday evenings. No one would notice for days. My hands trembled as I spread the papers across the bed. The dog whined from outside the room, refusing to cross the threshold. Each document painted a picture of someone I'd never met, someone who had been living a double life while sharing family dinners and holiday conversations. The photographs were worse, candid shots taken from a distance, women going about their daily routines, unaware they were being watched. Some faces I recognized from the missing persons reports. Others remained nameless, their fates unknown. Each image was dated and annotated with disturbing details about their habits, their vulnerabilities, their routines. I found a journal buried deeper in the box. The entries started innocently enough, describing loneliness and frustration, but as I read further, the tone shifted. The words became darker, more calculated. He wrote about following women, about the thrill of remaining unseen, about fantasies that grew more elaborate with each passing entry. The final entries were the most chilling. He described a specific plan, a woman he'd been watching for months, her schedule, her apartment layout, her lack of security measures. The last entry was dated just days before his disappearance. "Tonight I make my move, she won't see it coming." But there was something else in the box that made my blood run cold. A driver's license that didn't belong to my brother. A woman's license with a photo of someone I'd seen in his surveillance photographs. The license had been reported stolen months ago, according to a police report that was also in the box. But how had he obtained it? I called the police department to inquire about the woman whose license I'd found. The officer who answered was hesitant to share information, but eventually confirmed that she had been reported missing around the same time my brother disappeared. Her case had gone cold. No leads, no suspects, no trace of what had happened to her. The investigation that followed was thorough but ultimately inconclusive. Police searched the house, the property, the surrounding areas. They found more evidence of my brother's disturbing activities, additional photographs, detailed maps of women's daily routes, even recordings of phone conversations he'd somehow intercepted. But they never found him, and they never found the missing woman. The detective assigned to the case was a middle-aged man with tired eyes who'd seen too many cases like this. He explained that my brother had likely escalated from watching to acting, but without concrete evidence or a body, they couldn't build a case. The missing woman's family deserved answers, but answers were exactly what we couldn't provide. What haunted me most was the realization that I'd been living with a predator and never suspected anything. He'd been careful, methodical, hiding his true nature behind a facade of normalcy. The brother who helped me move apartments, who remembered my birthday, who called to check on me when I was sick, that same person had been stalking women and planning their harm. I tried to piece together the final days before his disappearance. Had he carried out his plan? Had something gone wrong? The missing woman's case remained open, but the trail had gone cold months ago. My brother had simply vanished, leaving behind only questions and evidence of his dark intentions. The dog never did enter that room again. Even after I removed all the evidence, after the police finished their investigation, after I cleaned and repainted the entire space, he would only stand at the threshold and whine. Animals sense things we can't understand, and perhaps he knew something I was still discovering. I sold the house within a year. The new owners were a young couple with children, and I couldn't bring myself to tell them about the room's history. Some secrets are too heavy to share, too dark to burden others with. But I kept the key to that metal box, and sometimes I wonder if there are other boxes, other secrets, other victims whose stories will never be told. The missing woman's family still posts on social media, still hopes for answers. They share her photograph on anniversary dates, pleading for any information about her disappearance. I've considered reaching out, sharing what I found, but what comfort would it bring? The evidence suggests the worst possible outcome, but without proof, without closure, would my revelations cause more pain than peace? My brother's disappearance remains as mysterious as his crimes. Did he flee when he realized he was close to being caught? Did something happen to him during his final planned attack? Or is he still out there in another town, watching other women, planning other crimes? The truth is, I'll never know for certain what happened in those final days, but I know that the brother I mourned was never real. The person I grieved was a carefully constructed lie, a mask worn by someone capable of unspeakable acts. And somewhere, families are still waiting for answers about their missing daughters, sisters, mothers, answers that died with him or vanished into the same darkness that consumed his final days. The dog was right to refuse that room. Some thresholds should never be crossed, some doors should remain forever closed. But once you've seen what lies beyond, once you've touched the evidence of such calculated evil, you can never quite close the door on the questions that follow you into every quiet moment, every shadow, every reminder that the people we trust most might be the ones hiding the darkest secrets. Crime 5, it hadn't rained, there were no pipes above it. Still, the attic door was damp to the touch, slimy even. The ceiling around it was bone dry. I climbed up to look, dust hung thick in the air. Nothing seemed out of place until I saw the footprints, bare, small, and recent. They led to the far corner, then stopped. No exit, no window. Just that damp, musky smell and a trail of nail scratches on the floor. I'd been hired to clean out the estate after she died. The woman downstairs, alone for decades, neighbors said. They found her 3 days after she passed, sitting in her favorite chair like she'd just dozed off watching television. Natural causes, the coroner ruled. Nothing suspicious about an elderly woman dying peacefully in her own home. But standing in that attic, staring at those small, desperate scratches gouged into the wooden boards, I felt my stomach turn. The marks were fresh. The wood beneath them was lighter, unstained by years of neglect. Someone had been up here recently. Someone had been clawing at this floor. I called the detective assigned to the case. His voice carried that weary tone of someone who'd seen too much and believed too little. "Probably animal tracks," he said when I described the prints. "Raccoons, maybe squirrels, they get trapped up there all the time." But I'd seen animal tracks before. These were human. 5 toes, a distinct heel impression, small enough to belong to a child or a petite adult. And they were everywhere, circling the cramped space like someone had been pacing, trapped, searching for a way out. The smell bothered me most. It wasn't the musty scent of old houses or the dry dust of forgotten spaces. It was organic, living, like fierce sweat in something else I couldn't identify. Something that reminded me of the hospital where my father died, that antiseptic smell that can't quite mask what lies beneath. I started asking questions around the neighborhood. The woman had lived alone for 20 years, they said. Quiet, kept to herself, but a few neighbors mentioned seeing lights in the attic windows late at night over the past few months. Strange, they thought, since she could barely climb the stairs to her bedroom anymore. The mailman remembered something else. Young woman, he said, maybe early 20s, thin, nervous looking. She'd been coming around regularly, always during the day when most people were at work. He'd seen her leaving through the back door more than once. When he asked the elderly woman about it, she'd grown agitated, claimed she didn't know what he was talking about. I went back to the house that evening. The electricity was still connected, so I brought a proper flashlight and spent more time in the attic. Near the corner where the footprints ended, I found something the initial sweep had missed. A small, torn piece of fabric caught on a nail. Cotton, light blue, stained with something dark. Underneath a loose floorboard, my fingers found a cell phone. Old model, cracked screen, but it still held a charge. The call log told a story that made my hands shake. Dozens of calls to emergency services, all cut short. Text messages that never sent, each one a plea for help. The last entry was a voice memo, recorded just days before the old woman died. The voice was barely a whisper, hoarse from what sounded like screaming. A young woman, desperate, explaining how she'd been locked up here for weeks. how the old woman brought her food and water but wouldn't let her leave, how she'd tried to escape but the door was always locked from the outside, how she was getting weaker, sicker, how she didn't think she'd survive much longer. The recording ended abruptly. I sat in that dusty attic, holding someone's final words, and realized I was looking at more than just an old woman's lonely death. The medical examiner had focused on the body downstairs, but what about the person who'd been imprisoned up here? Where had she gone? The next morning I contacted the detective again. This time his interest sharpened when I mentioned the phone and the recording. He agreed to meet me at the house, but when we arrived, something was different. The attic door, which I'd left open, was now sealed shut. Not just closed, there were fresh screws around the frame, as if someone had tried to permanently lock it. The detective called for a forensics team. They found more than we'd bargained for. Behind the walls, they discovered a small space that had been converted into a makeshift prison. A mattress, empty food containers, and evidence that someone had been held there for an extended period, but no body. The investigation expanded. Missing person reports were cross-referenced. A young woman had been reported missing 2 months earlier by a worried friend, but the case had gone cold quickly. No family to push for answers, no significant others to demand justice. Just another person who'd slipped through the cracks of society's attention. Security footage from nearby businesses showed her walking toward the old woman's neighborhood on the day she disappeared. After that, nothing. It was as if she'd simply vanished into thin air. But the forensics team made one more discovery that changed everything. Inside the makeshift prison, they found evidence of recent escape attempts. The walls showed signs of someone trying to claw their way out, and there was a pattern to the scratch marks that matched the ones I'd found on the attic floor. Someone had broken free. The old woman's death was reclassified. What appeared to be natural causes took on a different meaning when they found traces of prescription medication in her system, medication that wasn't prescribed to her, medication that in large doses could cause cardiac episodes. I think about that young woman often. Where did she go after she escaped? Did she kill her captor and then disappear, afraid no one would believe her story? Or was she so damaged by her imprisonment that she couldn't face returning to the world? The case remains officially open, but leads have dried up. No arrests have been made. No body has been found. The house sits empty now, condemned by the city after the investigation concluded. Sometimes I drive by at night and wonder if I see a light in that attic window. I tell myself it's just my imagination, the streetlights playing tricks on my eyes. But deep down, I can't shake the feeling that this story isn't over. Justice feels incomplete when the victim becomes a ghost and the truth remains buried in the walls of an old house. I cleaned out that estate, but I never could clean out the questions that refused to leave me alone. In the end, maybe that's the real crime, not just what happened in that attic, but how easily someone can disappear without anyone noticing until it's too late. Crime 6, the cabin had a guest book near the fireplace filled with notes from past renters. Most were dated and cheerful until the last few pages. They weren't signed, they were short, desperate, and smeared. It watches while you sleep. Don't answer if it knocks. He never left. The ink was still wet. I hadn't seen anyone around for days. But that night a note appeared. Why did you open this? I work for the county as a property investigator. My job is to inspect abandoned or disputed properties, document their condition, and sometimes help settle estate matters. The cabin came to my attention after 3 families had broken their rental agreements within a month, all claiming the place was uninhabitable. The owner insisted there was nothing wrong with the property. The drive up the mountain road felt longer than it should have. Pine trees pressed close to the asphalt, their branches scraping against my car windows. The cabin sat in a clearing, surrounded by wilderness that seemed to swallow sound. I'd been there twice before during daylight inspections, but this was my first overnight stay. The county wanted a thorough report. Inside, everything appeared normal. Kitchen appliances worked, plumbing functioned, heating system hummed quietly. The furniture was rustic but clean. Then I found the guest book. The first entries were typical, families thanking the hosts for a wonderful weekend, couples celebrating anniversaries, children drawing stick figures of deer and mountains. But as I flipped through the pages, the tone shifted. The entries became shorter, more tense. Someone had written, "Heard footsteps on the roof all night," in shaky handwriting. Another entry simply said, "The smell won't go away." The last few pages made my skin crawl. No dates, no signatures, just fragments of panic. Check the basement. Don't use the back bedroom. Something's wrong with the mirror. The handwriting varied, but all the entries shared the same desperate quality. I called the property owner, an elderly woman who inherited the cabin from her uncle. She claimed she'd never seen these entries before, said the guest book was supposed to be replaced monthly. Her voice wavered when I read her some of the messages. She hung up before I could ask more questions. That first night I heard nothing unusual, but I didn't sleep well. Every creak of the old wood made me tense. The silence between sounds felt heavy, waiting. When I woke, I checked the guest book immediately. No new entries. The next morning, I searched the basement. Concrete walls, wooden shelves lined with canned goods and tools. Nothing seemed disturbed, but there was an odor I couldn't identify. Sweet but wrong, like flowers left too long in stagnant water. I found a stack of old photographs behind a box of fishing gear. They showed the cabin in different seasons, different years. In several photos, the same man appeared in the background, tall, thin, wearing a dark jacket. His face was always turned away from the camera. I drove to the nearest town and visited the sheriff's office. The deputy who helped me was young, eager to assist. He pulled up incident reports for the property. 3 noise complaints in the past year, all from the same neighbor, a retired teacher who lived a mile down the road. She claimed someone was staying at the cabin even when it was supposed to be empty. I found the teacher's house easily. She was working in her garden when I arrived, her movements sharp and purposeful. She looked up at my approach, and I saw recognition in her eyes before I even introduced myself. "You're staying up there," she said. It wasn't a question. I nodded. "I'm investigating some issues with the property." Her laugh was bitter. "Issues, that's one way to put it." She wiped dirt from her hands with a rag. "How long have you been there?" 2 days. "And you've seen him?" I felt my pulse quicken. "Seen who?" She studied my face carefully. "The man who never leaves, the one who watches from the tree line, the one who comes back even when they change the locks." My mouth went dry. "Who is he?" "That's what I've been trying to figure out for 3 years. She gestured toward the cabin, hidden behind the trees. The old owner, the uncle, he had a caretaker, lived up there full time, kept the place maintained. When the uncle died, the caretaker was supposed to move out, but he never did. What happened to him? Nobody knows. He just vanished one day, but people keep seeing him, keep hearing him moving around at night. The new owner doesn't want to hear about it, says it's impossible, that she has the only keys. I showed her the photographs I'd found. Her face went pale when she saw the man in the background. "That's him," she whispered. "That's the caretaker." I drove back to the cabin as the sun was setting. The building looked different in the fading light, more isolated, more watchful. I parked and sat in my car for several minutes, staring at the dark windows. The teacher's words echoed in my mind. Inside, I went straight to the guest book. A new entry waited on the last page, written in the same desperate handwriting I'd seen before. He's in the walls. My hands shook as I turned the pages. The earlier entries I'd read were gone. In their place were new messages, all in the same frantic script. Don't let him know you're here. He leaves things in your food. The basement door opens by itself. I called the property owner again. This time she answered on the first ring. "I've been expecting your call," she said. "The guest book keeps changing. Someone's been in the cabin." A long pause. "I need to tell you something about my uncle, about why he left me this property." "Go on." "He didn't just hire a caretaker. He let someone live there because that person had nowhere else to go. Someone who'd been in trouble, who needed to disappear for a while. My uncle was trying to help him." "What kind of trouble?" "The kind that makes people ask questions. The kind that makes families hire private investigators." I felt the temperature in the room drop. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe the caretaker never left because he couldn't leave. Maybe he's still hiding. Maybe he's been watching everyone who comes to the cabin, making sure they don't stay long enough to discover whatever he's hiding." I set the phone down and looked around the cabin with new eyes. The photographs I'd found showed him in the background, always watching, always present. But in every image, his face was turned away, like he was trying not to be seen, even in pictures. The basement door was open. I was certain I'd closed it after my search. I grabbed a flashlight and descended the wooden steps. The sweet, wrong smell was stronger now. At the back of the basement, behind the shelves, I found a section of wall that didn't match the rest. Newer concrete, poured around something that created an irregular bulge. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. I understood what I was looking at. The guest book had one final entry when I returned upstairs. "Now you know why I can't leave." I packed my belongings and drove away that night. My report to the county was brief and technical. Property unsuitable for rental due to structural issues requiring extensive investigation. I recommended it be condemned pending further inquiry. But I never submitted the photographs. I never mentioned the teacher's story. I never told anyone about the wall in the basement. Sometimes I wonder if I should have. If staying silent makes me complicit in whatever happened in that cabin. But then I remember the desperate handwriting in the guest book, the way the entries changed when no one was watching, the way someone's guilt had turned them into a ghost, trapped in the place where they'd hidden their crime. The property owner called me once more, weeks later. She said she decided to sell the cabin to a developer. They were going to tear it down and build something new. She asked if I thought that was the right decision. I told her yes, but I wasn't sure I believed it. Some secrets are too heavy to bury with concrete and too dangerous to expose to light. They exist in the space between truth and fiction, between justice and mercy, between what we know and what we're willing to accept. The cabin is gone now. But sometimes, late at night, I still wonder about that guest book, about the man who couldn't leave and the families who discovered his presence too late, about the thin line between helping someone hide and helping them disappear completely. And I wonder if the new house, built on the same foundation, will have its own guest book, if future visitors will find their own desperate messages, written by hands that shake with knowledge they wished they'd never gained. The truth is buried somewhere in those mountains, but perhaps that's where it belongs. Crime 7, I kept hearing tapping, soft, irregular, like knuckles against drywall. At first I blamed the neighbors, but the wall it came from had no adjoining unit, just empty air. I pressed my ear against it, breathing. That's what it sounded like, slow and shaky. I knocked once, it stopped. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning I checked again. Someone had carved something faint into the paint. Dig. The landlord's voice cracked when I called about the wall. He cleared his throat twice before answering, said he'd send someone to look at it. No one came. I called again. This time he mentioned the previous tenant had complained about noises too. Said she moved out suddenly, left half her belongings behind. Her security deposit covered the cleanup. Strange thing to volunteer. I ran my fingers along the carved word again. The paint flaked under my nail, revealing older layers beneath. The carving went deeper than it first appeared. Someone had pressed hard, desperate. The wall felt different around those letters, softer, like the drywall had been patched and painted over, multiple times. The building manager lived in the basement unit. Her apartment smelled like bleach and something else, something sweet and heavy that caught in my throat. She wore rubber gloves while we talked, yellow ones that squeaked when she gestured. Said the previous tenant was troubled, always hearing things that weren't there. Claimed people were watching her through the walls. Paranoid, she called it, but her eyes never met mine when she spoke. I found the rental application in my lease folder. The previous tenant's handwriting was careful, precise. Nothing about mental illness in her references. Her former landlord described her as quiet, reliable, paid rent early every month. Worked as a social worker, specialized in missing persons cases. Not someone who typically developed sudden paranoia. The tapping returned that night, more insistent. I pressed my phone against the wall, recording. The sound was clearer through the speaker, definitely rhythmic, almost like Morse code. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. Anyone who'd watched old war movies would recognize it. SOS. I played the recording for my neighbor across the hall. She pulled me inside her apartment, locked the door behind us. Her hands shook as she poured coffee. She'd heard it too, she whispered. Started right after the previous tenant moved out. Sometimes she heard other sounds, scraping like something being dragged. Once she thought she heard crying. The coffee cup trembled in her grip. She tried to befriend the previous tenant, she said. Brought her cookies, invited her for dinner. The woman always seemed grateful but distracted, kept checking her phone, looking over her shoulder. Said she was working on a case that was eating at her. Missing girl, family convinced she was still alive somewhere. I couldn't stop thinking about the carved message. Why carve into a wall instead of calling for help, unless calling wasn't an option, unless someone was watching, listening, waiting? The previous tenant's fear started making sense. If she discovered something about her missing persons case, something that put her in danger. The building's basement stretched further than I'd expected. Storage units lined the walls, most secured with simple padlocks. The manager's unit sat at the far end, different from the others. Heavy-duty lock, reinforced door, no windows. The sweet smell was stronger down here, mixed with that persistent bleach odor. I researched the missing persons case online. The girl had vanished from her college dorm, no signs of struggle, personal belongings left behind. Security cameras showed her leaving alone, but she never arrived at her destination. The investigation went cold after 3 months. No body, no ransom demands, no activity on her credit cards, just gone. The previous tenant's name appeared in several news articles about the case. She'd been vocal about the police department's handling of the investigation, claimed they'd given up too easily. She'd continued searching on her own time, following leads they'd dismissed. Her supervisor had reportedly warned her about getting too personally involved. I found her social media profiles. The posts grew increasingly paranoid in her final weeks at the apartment, complained about being followed, phones tapped, mail opened. Her last post mentioned discovering something important, promised to reveal everything soon. The account went silent after that. The building's construction records showed my unit's bedroom wall had been modified several times over the past 2 years. Emergency repairs according to the permits. Water damage, then electrical work, then more water damage. Convenient explanations for repeatedly opening and resealing the same wall. I called the missing girl's family. Her mother's voice broke when I mentioned the previous tenant's name. They'd stayed in touch even after the official investigation ended, she said. The tenant had been convinced the girl was being held somewhere nearby, had narrowed the search to a specific neighborhood, our neighborhood. The mother's words haunted me. The tenant had called her the week before disappearing, excited about a breakthrough. Said she'd found where the girl was being kept, was planning to contact police the next day. But she never called back. When the family tried reaching her, the number was disconnected. I stared at the wall, understanding finally why someone would carve a message instead of screaming. The previous tenant hadn't been paranoid, she'd been silenced, and whoever silenced her wanted it to look like she'd simply moved away, convinced everyone she was unstable. The carved word wasn't a suggestion anymore. It was an instruction. Evidence lay behind this wall, proof of what happened to both the missing girl and the woman who tried to save her. Someone had made sure the truth stayed buried, literally and figuratively. I pressed my ear against the drywall one more time. The breathing sound was fainter now, but still there, patient, waiting. And I realized with growing horror that it might not be the sound of someone trapped behind the wall. It might be the sound of someone who'd put them there. Crime 8, I hadn't noticed them until I took a bath. Faint lines just under the water line like someone had clawed at the porcelain. I drained the tub to look closer. There were initials scratched in over and over, deep enough to leave rust stains. I tried covering them with cleaner, even painted over them. But each day they reappear, same marks, same pattern. One set of initials matches mine. The rental agreement was still in my desk drawer, pristine white paper that somehow felt heavier than it should. The previous tenant's name had been blacked out with permanent marker, thick strokes that bled through to the back of the page. When I held it up to the light, I could make out fragments underneath. Letters that formed shapes I didn't want to recognize. The landlord had been eager to rent, too eager. The way his eyes darted around the bathroom when he showed me the place, how quickly he'd brushed past the tub without looking directly at it. He mentioned the previous tenant had left suddenly, something about a family emergency. His voice had that practiced quality people develop when they've told the same lie multiple times. I started sleeping poorly. The scratching sounds began around midnight, always from the direction of the bathroom. Soft at first, like fingernails on wood, then more insistent. I'd wake up and check, but the apartment was always empty, door still locked from the inside. The scratches in the tub seemed deeper each morning, more defined. New initials appeared alongside the old ones. The neighbor across the hall avoided eye contact now. She used to smile, make small talk about the weather. But after the first week, she'd hurry past whenever she saw me, keys already in hand before she reached her door. I caught her watching me through her peephole once. The light dimmed for just a moment when I looked back. I found the newspaper clippings wedged behind the bathroom radiator while cleaning. Old paper, yellowed at the edges, folded and refolded until the creases had worn white. The headline spoke of a missing person case, investigation ongoing, family seeking answers. No name in the article I could make out. Water damage had blurred most of the text. But there was a photo, grainy and unclear, of someone who looked familiar in a way that made my stomach turn. The scratches weren't random. They followed a pattern, clustered in specific areas of the tub. I mapped them out on graph paper, connected the marks, tried to find meaning in their arrangement. They formed shapes, crude letters, repeated over and over. Some were shallow, hesitant, others cut deep enough to chip the porcelain underneath. My own initials were there from the beginning, I realized, not something that appeared later. They'd always been part of the pattern, worn smooth by countless baths, countless attempts to scrub them away. The rust stains around them were older than my tenancy, older than the previous resident mentioned in the blackened lease. The building's maintenance records were kept in the basement, boxes of yellowed forms and repair requests stacked against concrete walls. I found references to bathroom repairs dating back years, repeated requests to fix scratches in the tub, complaints about strange sounds at night, tenants breaking leases early. Always the same apartment, always the same bathroom. A former tenant had left a forwarding address on an old work order. I drove there on a gray afternoon, found a small house with overgrown hedges and newspapers piled on the porch. The woman who answered the door looked older than she should have, her hair thin and her hands shaking slightly. She recognized my address before I finished saying it. She invited me in, made tea with water that tasted metallic. Her living room was sparse, like someone who'd moved quickly and left things behind. When I mentioned the scratches, her cup rattled against the saucer. She'd tried everything too, she said. Paint, bleach, even had someone come to resurface the tub. Nothing worked. The marks always came back. She told me about the nightmares, dreams of drowning, of clawing at smooth surfaces that offered no grip, waking up with dirt under her fingernails even though she'd cleaned them before bed, the feeling of being watched while bathing, of something lurking just below the surface of the water. She'd moved out after finding her own initials scratched into the porcelain one morning, initials she was certain she'd never carved. The conversation grew uncomfortable when I mentioned my own initials appearing in the tub. Her face went pale, and she excused herself to check something in another room. I heard drawers opening, papers rustling. When she returned, she carried a manila envelope, the kind lawyers use for important documents. Inside were photographs of the tub, taken from different angles at different times. The scratches were there in every image, but the initials changed from photo to photo. Different letters, different depths, different levels of wear. My initials were in several of the pictures, clear and unmistakable, in photos dated years before I'd ever seen the apartment. She wouldn't explain how she'd gotten the photos, wouldn't say who'd taken them or why. Just kept repeating that some places hold onto things, that some marks go deeper than the surface. When I pressed for details, she showed me to the door, her hands still trembling as she turned the locks behind me. I drove home through streets that seemed unfamiliar despite being the same route I'd taken hundreds of times. The apartment felt different when I walked in, smaller somehow, as if the walls had moved closer together while I was gone. The bathroom door was closed, though I distinctly remembered leaving it open. The scratches were deeper now, more numerous. Initials I'd never seen before joined the familiar ones, and some of the older marks had been worn smooth, as if invisible hands had been tracing them while I was away. The water in the tub was running, though I hadn't turned it on, filling slowly with liquid that seemed darker than it should be. I knelt beside the tub and ran my fingers along the scratches, feeling the rough edges where porcelain had given way to desperate fingernails. The metal was cold, colder than the air in the room, and seemed to pulse with a rhythm I recognized but couldn't place. As I touched each mark, I felt the urge to add my own, to join the chorus of initials that decorated the surface like a guest book for the desperate. The realization came slowly, the way understanding sometimes does when you're not ready for it. The scratches weren't made by previous tenants. They were made by the same person, over and over, in different moments, different states of mind. Someone who kept forgetting they'd been there before, who kept discovering their own handiwork as if seeing it for the first time. I looked at my hands, at the dirt caked under fingernails I'd scrubbed clean that morning. The apartment lease was still on my desk, but now I could see through the black marker to the name underneath. My name, written in handwriting I didn't remember forming, on a document I didn't remember signing. The water in the tub continued to rise, and somewhere in its depth I could see the reflection of someone I thought I knew, someone who'd been trying to claw their way out for longer than seemed possible. Crime 9, it was almost unnoticeable, just a seam in the plaster above the hallway, but once I saw it I couldn't unsee it. I got a chair, poked it gently. The square creaked open. Inside was a narrow crawl space filled with insulation. And one thing more, a pair of boots, perfectly aligned, facing the opening. The soles were caked in dried mud, and next to them was a knife, still wet when I touched it. The house belonged to my late uncle. I inherited it after his sudden death, along with the responsibility of sorting through decades of accumulated possessions. The real estate agent had mentioned it was move-in ready, but standing in that hallway, staring at those boots, I realized how wrong she was. I called the police immediately. They came, took pictures, bagged the evidence. The detective, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, asked me routine questions. Had my uncle mentioned any threats, any unusual behavior before his death? I shook my head to everything. He had been a quiet man, lived alone, kept to himself. The knife went to the lab, the boots too. While waiting for results, I started going through his papers. My uncle had been meticulous about record keeping. Every receipt, every bill, every newspaper clipping filed away in labeled folders. But there were gaps, whole months missing from his calendar. Bank statements with cash withdrawals that didn't match his modest lifestyle. And photographs tucked between pages of old phone books, pictures of people I didn't recognize, taken from a distance, some through windows. The lab results came back inconclusive. The knife had been wiped clean except for traces of dish soap. The boots were common work boots, size 10, available at any hardware store. No fingerprints, no DNA, nothing that could lead to identification. The detective closed the file, case cold before it even started. But I couldn't let it go. I started talking to neighbors, people who might have known my uncle better than I did. Most described him as friendly but private. He helped with yard work, fixed broken appliances, never caused trouble. Yet when I pressed for details about his habits, his visitors, his routines, their stories began to shift. One neighbor mentioned seeing him leave the house at unusual hours, carrying a large duffel bag. Another recalled how he always seemed to know when packages were delivered to houses on the block, even when the residents weren't home. A third remembered him asking detailed questions about family schedules, vacation plans, daily routines. I found a spare key hidden under a loose board on his back porch. Inside his bedroom closet, behind winter coats that smelled of mothballs and neglect, I discovered a metal box. It contained more photographs, these ones clearer, more deliberate. Pictures of windows at night, glowing with warm light, families eating dinner, children playing in living rooms, all taken from outside looking in. There were addresses written on the backs of some photos, street names I recognized from the neighborhood. I drove past those houses during daylight, comparing them to the images. Each one matched perfectly. My uncle had been watching these families, documenting their lives, learning their patterns. The duffel bag was in the garage, stuffed behind paint cans and garden tools. Inside, I found more work boots, different sizes, different styles, gloves, flashlights, small tools, and rope. Coils of thin rope, the kind used for climbing or restraining. I returned to the crawl space with a proper flashlight this time. The insulation had been disturbed in several places, creating pathways through the narrow space. Following one path, I discovered it led to an opening above the master bedroom. Another path ended above the kitchen. A third terminated above the bathroom. Each opening was carefully concealed but could be opened from inside the crawl space. The implications settled over me like cold water. My uncle hadn't just been watching these families from outside. He had been inside their homes, moving through their ceilings, observing them from above. The thought of him lying in that cramped space, listening to conversations, watching private moments, made my skin crawl. I checked the bathroom ceiling in his own house. Another hatch, this one newer than the others, cut with precision tools. The wood shavings were still fresh. He had been practicing, perfecting his technique. But questions remained that gnawed at me during sleepless nights. How long had this been going on? How many houses had he accessed? And most disturbing of all, what had he done with the information he gathered? The detective listened to my discoveries with professional interest but limited enthusiasm. Without victims coming forward, without evidence of actual crimes committed, there was little she could do. Trespassing charges against a dead man seemed pointless. She suggested I contact the families in the photographs, let them know what I had found, advise them to check their own ceilings and change their locks. I tried calling the first family. The woman who answered became hysterical when I explained the situation. She hung up before I could finish. The second family accused me of making up stories, threatened to call the police if I contacted them again. The third family had moved away, their phone disconnected. Frustrated, I decided to visit one of the houses in person. I waited until evening when the family would be home. The woman who answered the door was young, maybe early 30s, with dark circles under her eyes that spoke of recent sleepless nights. When I mentioned my uncle's name, her face went white. She invited me inside, her hands shaking as she poured coffee. Her husband worked night shifts, she explained, leaving her alone with their 2 young children. Over the past few months, she had been hearing sounds from above, creaking noises that couldn't be explained by normal house settling. Objects had been moved, barely noticeable changes that she attributed to forgetfulness. Food had disappeared from the refrigerator in small amounts. She had mentioned these incidents to her husband, but he dismissed them as imagination, stress from being alone with the children. Now, hearing about my uncle, everything made terrible sense. She asked me to check their ceiling. I found a hatch above their bedroom, hidden behind a light fixture. The edges had been recently disturbed. We called the police together. They found evidence that someone had been in the crawl space regularly. Insulation compressed into pathways, small holes drilled through the ceiling for observation, even a makeshift nest of blankets in one corner where someone could lie comfortably for extended periods. But the investigation raised more questions than answers. How had my uncle gained access to install these hatches? When had he done the work? Had he acted alone, or were there others involved? The woman remembered contractors working on various houses in the neighborhood over the past year, routine maintenance and repair work. Any of them could have been my uncle or his accomplices. The police expanded their investigation to other houses on the block. They found evidence of unauthorized entry in 3 more homes. Always the same pattern: carefully concealed ceiling hatches, compressed insulation pathways, small observation holes. But still no clear evidence of what my uncle had been doing with his access, beyond watching and listening. Then I found his journal hidden inside the cover of an old telephone directory. The entries were brief, written in a code I couldn't decipher. Numbers, letters, abbreviated words that could mean anything. But the dates corresponded to the times when families reported strange occurrences. The final entry was from the day before my uncle died. The coroner had ruled his death a heart attack, natural causes, but reading through his journal, I began to wonder if there was more to it. The final entries seemed agitated, different from the calm, methodical observations that preceded them. Had he been discovered, confronted, threatened? I tried to decode the journal entries, looking for patterns, recurring symbols, anything that might reveal my uncle's true purpose. Some entries coincided with reported burglaries in the area, though nothing was ever taken from the houses he had accessed. Other entries corresponded to family emergencies, medical incidents, personal crises that had affected the families he watched. The possibility that he had been somehow involved in these events, perhaps even causing them, was too disturbing to fully accept. Yet the timing was too consistent to be coincidental. My uncle had not just been a voyeur, he had been something much more dangerous. The investigation eventually stalled. Without clear evidence of specific crimes, without cooperation from all the affected families, the police could only do so much. They recommended that everyone in the neighborhood check their ceilings, install security systems, change their locks, but the damage was already done. The sense of safety, of privacy, had been shattered. I sold my uncle's house as quickly as possible, but I kept his journal. Sometimes I still tried to decode the entries, hoping to understand what drove him to such elaborate surveillance. Was it simple voyeurism or something more complex? Had he been planning something that his death prevented? Or had someone else been controlling his actions, using him as a tool for their own purposes? The boots in the ceiling hatch were never explained. They didn't belong to my uncle, too small for his feet. The knife remained a mystery as well, clean of evidence, but wet when I found it as if it had been used recently. For what purpose, I may never know. But I do know this, my uncle's death was not the end of the story. It was merely the conclusion of one chapter in something larger and more disturbing. The journal entries continue to haunt me, their coded messages hiding secrets I'm not sure I want to uncover. And sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, I wonder if I'm being watched too, if someone else has taken up where my uncle left off. The ceiling hatch in my own apartment has never been disturbed. I check it regularly. But I can't shake the feeling that somewhere in some crawl space I haven't found yet, someone is still watching, still waiting, still planning. The mud on those boots had to come from somewhere, and the knife, still wet with whatever purpose it had served, suggests that my uncle's activities were far from harmless observation. I may never know the complete truth about what my uncle was doing in those ceiling spaces or why. But I know enough to sleep with my bedroom door locked, to check for unusual sounds above, and to wonder if the person who left those boots and that knife in the crawl space is still out there, continuing the work my uncle started. The investigation is officially closed, but the questions remain open, hanging in the air like dust motes in an abandoned attic, waiting for someone brave enough or foolish enough to disturb them again. Story 10: The Mystery of the Dollhouse. She always avoided going up to the attic, finding it a place of unease and shadows. But a fierce storm had ripped through the town, causing a leak in the roof that demanded her attention. Reluctantly, she ascended the creaking stairs, greeted by a musty scent and a shroud of forgotten memories draped in dust and cobwebs. Among the forsaken belongings, tucked away in the farthest corner, sat an old dollhouse. Its presence sent shivers down her spine, for it was no ordinary dollhouse. It was a miniature replica of a home, exquisitely detailed with tiny furniture meticulously arranged. Yet as she peered into its rooms, a wave of dread washed over her. The figures within were not dolls, but intricately hand-carved replicas of her own family. Every detail mirrored reality, each figure placed exactly where they had been in their living room downstairs. Every detail, that is, except for one. The figure meant to represent her stood by the attic door, a silent sentinel in the tiny world. Rebecca Morgan, her heart racing, traced her finger over the dollhouse roof, feeling the indent where the small wooden figure stood. A chill crept through her, unrelated to the cold draft whispering through the attic. This dollhouse had no place here. This wasn't her childhood home, but a rented abode the family had recently moved into. The discovery of the dollhouse set off a chain of events that would unravel a web of mystery and intrigue. Rebecca's frantic call to the authorities brought them to the suburban residence, where a family huddled in fear, refusing to return to the upper floors. Detective Sarah Harmon, the lead investigator, initially dismissed their concerns as mere paranoia, attributing it to the stress of adjusting to a new environment. But the intricate craftsmanship of the dollhouse caught her attention. Each miniature figure bore a striking resemblance to the family members, capturing their essence with eerie precision. The father's receding hairline, the teenage son's favorite hoodie, even the mother's small birthmark on her hand, all faithfully replicated in miniature form. Forensic analysis revealed fingerprints on the dollhouse that belonged to no one in the family. Further examination uncovered microscopic cameras hidden within the eyes of each figure, all linked to a sophisticated recording system concealed beneath the dollhouse. It became clear that someone had been watching the Morgans, studying their every move with meticulous care. The investigation took a dark turn when a hidden entrance to the basement was discovered behind a false pantry wall. Inside, evidence pointed to an intruder who had been living beneath the family's feet, unnoticed for weeks. Food wrappers, water bottles, and a sleeping bag hinted at a clandestine existence below the floorboards. The puzzle deepened as it was revealed that the house had been vacant for a considerable period before the Morgans' arrival. The previous owners, an elderly couple, had passed away, leaving their son, Martin Wells, to oversee the property. But Martin had a dark secret, a fixation on the homes he once knew, manifested in a twisted game of surveillance and control. Digital forensics led investigators to Martin's apartment, a den of obsession filled with photographs of the Morgan family and others who had inhabited the house. Journal entries chronicled their daily routines with unsettling accuracy, while a workshop contained multiple unfinished dollhouses, each representing a different household in the area. Martin Wells, when confronted, remained eerily composed, revealing a delusional belief that the houses belonged to him, that the families within were his to observe and manipulate. His actions stemmed from a deep-seated need for control, a desire to reclaim what he had lost with his childhood home. As the truth came to light, the Morgans made the difficult decision to leave the house behind, haunted by the realization that they had been mere pawns in Martin's disturbing game. His arrest and subsequent trial exposed a level of intrusion and violation that shook the community to its core. Yet what chilled the investigators most was the thought of how long Martin might have continued his twisted schemes if not for Rebecca's discovery of the dollhouse. His journals hinted at a prolonged history of covert living, moving from one empty property to another, creating miniature worlds of those he watched. The Morgans sought solace in a new home, far from the memories that haunted them. But Rebecca, in moments of quiet unease, still felt the weight of unseen eyes upon her. The doll houses were gone, the miniatures banished, but the fear of being watched lingered, a reminder that some nightmares, once uncovered, never truly fade into the shadows. Story 11: The Enigmatic Disappearance. The quaint coffee shop had been his sanctuary for as long as anyone could remember, his presence as constant as the morning sun filtering through the windows. He would arrive like clockwork, taking his usual seat in the corner, a silent observer amidst the bustling chatter and clinking of cups. The barista recognized his face, but his name remained a mystery to all. Then one fateful day he didn't show up. Concerned whispers spread through the shop like wildfire, a sense of unease settling over the regular patrons. When the authorities were called and his usual spot was inspected, all they found was a solitary wallet left behind, abandoned on the table. Inside, a driver's license with a face but no identity, no name, no address, just a void where his particulars should have been. Detective Sarah Mercer delved into the puzzling case, her brow furrowed in deep concentration as she scrutinized the perplexing security footage once more. The figure, now dubbed John Doe in the investigative records, appeared unremarkable at first glance. Average in stature, nondescript in appearance, clad in a navy coat and bearing a weathered messenger bag. Yet his vanishing act defied all logic, sending shivers down the spines of those who viewed the footage. "Play it again," Mercer directed the tech specialist, her voice tinged with a hint of urgency. The recording unfolded the ordinary routine: John's entrance during the morning rush, his simple order of black coffee, the retreat to his secluded corner adorned with a green leafy plant. Words scribbled in a notebook, coffee sipped thoughtfully, gazes drifting out the window. And then the pivotal moment arrived: his wallet placed on the table, a stand, a walk towards the restroom corridor. But he never returned, never re-emerged, simply evaporating into thin air. "Inspect the restroom footage," Mercer requested, her eyes narrowed in contemplation. "That's the curious part," the specialist replied. "No sign of him entering any restroom. It's as if he melted into the ether." Back at the precinct, Mercer meticulously laid out the contents of the enigmatic wallet, a photo that mirrored John Doe's visage, yet void of any personal data. Blank credit cards, neat stacks of cash, a recent coffee shop receipt, and a lone business card with a cryptic phone number. A call to the number yielded only eerie silence, punctuated by the faint rustle of paper before the line abruptly cut off. The barista's recollections provided scant clues. He kept to himself, always engrossed in that notebook, she mused. Rarely spoke, but kind-hearted. Maybe had a hint of an accent, but spoke so softly it was a whisper in the wind. The notebook, a trove of inscrutable symbols and coded text, remained a conundrum to the cryptographers tasked with deciphering its secrets. Drawings of unfamiliar architectural designs adorned its pages, prompting Mercer to dispatch officers to scour the neighborhood with John Doe's image. Yet no one recognized him. No missing persons report bore resemblance. No fingerprint matched his enigma. Intriguingly, Mercer noticed a peculiar anomaly in the surveillance recordings, an elusive flicker in the timestamp each time John entered the shop. Brushed off as a technical glitch by the specialist, Mercer's intuition prodded her to revisit the coffee shop, settling at his customary table. Her gaze wandered to an ancient mirror suspended between the entrance and the hallway, its ornate frame etched with cryptic symbols akin to those in John's notebook. Questioning the shop owner revealed little about the mirror's origins, save for its immovable presence since time immemorial. A touch to its surface revealed an unexpected warmth, prompting the forensics team to unveil a hidden compartment behind the mirror. Stacked wallets, identical in their anonymity, a journal chronicling decades of enigmatic entries scribed in the same hand as John's notebook. The final notation ominously declared, "The experiment must cease." They draw near. The portal wanes. Echoes of John Doe Daniel Weston's essence resonated throughout the concealed space, his fingerprints etched in time. Carbon dating hinted at a bygone era, yet his face remained untouched by the passage of time. The journal hinted at enigmatic trials of temporal manipulation and identity transcendence, alluding to crossing back and window points in cryptic prose. As the investigation unfurled, eerie manifestations encircled the coffee shop, reflections moving of their volition, sightings of John Doe where he shouldn't be. The breakthrough arrived with a call from a weathered physicist, Margaret Keller, unveiling Daniel Weston's clandestine past in quantum mirror experiments. Weston's belief in parallel realities and the frail boundaries between them painted a tapestry of intrigue that merged with the coffee shop's enigmatic aura. Returning to the coffee shop, Mercer unearthed its dark secret. The site stood upon the remnants of Weston's vanished laboratory, the epicenter of his enigmatic disappearance. And as Mercer pored over late-night surveillance, a startling revelation emerged in the shattered mirror's reflection. John Doe and Daniel Weston, two facets of the same enigma, coexisting in a fragile balance. With the mirror shattered, a final missive lay amidst the shards, a haunting declaration scribed in familiar penmanship. The experiment concludes. The gateway seals. Do not venture forth. The man who slipped through the chasms of reality remained an enigma, the coffee shop's doors closing for eternity, the building's demise sealing the mysteries within. Daniel Weston's fate eluded closure, and Mercer's fate intertwined with his legacy, inscribed in the eerie whispers of a spectral mirror and the frantically written pages of an enigmatic notebook. Story 12. The ancient library faced its fate of demolition. The workers toiled diligently until an unexpected discovery halted their progress. A hidden latch concealed within the depths of a bookshelf was accidentally revealed by a stumble. With a gentle click, the entire bookcase swung open, unveiling a secret passage leading to a concealed chamber. The air inside hung heavy, untouched by human presence for decades. The room bore no furnishings except for a solitary chair at its center, firmly bolted to the floor, and etched repeatedly on the wall, a haunting message echoed, "I am still here." The construction foreman swiftly radioed for the police as the mundane task of demolition morphed into a chilling enigma. Detective Morgan Walsh, a seasoned investigator with 2 decades of experience, stood at the threshold of the hidden room, his flashlight piercing the darkness and illuminating the eerie inscription that adorned the walls. "Secure the scene," Walsh commanded the officers, his voice reverberating in the confined space. "No one disturbs anything until forensics arrives." The history of the building painted a mysterious backdrop to the unfolding drama. The library had once belonged to the affluent Harrington family, known for their philanthropic endeavors. The establishment had been gifted to the public following the enigmatic disappearance of their daughter, Rebecca. She had vanished without a trace during her final year of college, leaving behind only an abandoned car near the woods. Despite exhaustive searches and inquiries, the case remained unsolved, shrouded in ambiguity. The prevailing belief was that she had chosen to flee her previous life, though her family adamantly refuted this theory, convinced of a darker truth. As forensic experts meticulously combed through the hidden chamber, they unearthed hair and fiber samples embedded in the chair. The scratches on the wall harbored minute traces of blood and skin cells beneath layers of neglect. Initial analysis hinted at the biological material belonging to a young female. "This chair was designed for confinement," remarked the forensic analyst, pointing to the weathered leather straps and bolt holes adorning it. The occupant put up a fierce struggle. Detective Walsh marshaled his team to delve into the enigmatic past of the Harrington family. An unsettling detail nagged at him. The timing of the library's donation following Rebecca's disappearance seemed more than mere coincidence. Further investigations unveiled a disturbing revelation. The contractor who had installed the bookshelf concealing the hidden room had exclusive ties to Maxwell Harrington, Rebecca's uncle and the patriarch of the family. Financial records disclosed exorbitant payments to this contractor, surpassing standard renovation costs by far. Former library staff expressed incredulity at the revelation, none having been privy to the existence of the concealed space. However, an elderly librarian recollected Maxwell's peculiar behavior, spending solitary hours in that secluded area of the building after hours. She had presumed his seclusion was merely a pursuit of solitude for his reading endeavors. Maxwell always insisted on preserving that particular part of the library during renovations, she disclosed to the investigators. He asserted its historical significance and irreplaceable nature. The investigation took a grim turn when DNA analysis confirmed that the biological remnants found in the hidden room matched samples from Rebecca's personal belongings. The timeline began to crystallize, painting a harrowing portrait. Rebecca had not fled. She had been held captive behind the bookshelf, likely by a member of her own family. Armed with a warrant, detectives combed through the Harrington estate. In Maxwell's study, they stumbled upon a leather-bound journal secreted within a concealed compartment of a drawer. The journal chronicled months of detailed entries, revealing a disturbing fixation on his niece. The final entry sent shivers down their spines. She threatened to expose everything. "I cannot allow that. The room shall confine her until she comprehends." They located Maxwell residing in a coastal retirement community and subjected him to interrogation. Initially composed, Maxwell feigned ignorance about the hidden chamber, dismissing it as a mere architectural enigma. However, when confronted with the incriminating evidence, his stoic facade crumbled. She was a threat to everything, he finally confessed, his voice devoid of emotion. Rebecca had stumbled upon financial records proving my embezzlement from the family foundation. The family's reputation was paramount. I could not permit her to tarnish it. His admission unveiled a macabre truth. Maxwell had lured Rebecca to the library, subdued her, and incarcerated her in the hidden room, intending to silence her until she relented. However, a fatal mishap occurred during one of his visits. Rebecca had attempted an escape, leading to a fatal altercation. In a panic, Maxwell recounted during his confession, "I interred her beneath the room's floorboards and sealed it shut." The donation of the building was to ensure the preservation of that section for eternity. Ground-penetrating radar confirmed the presence of human remains beneath the concealed room's floor. An excavation unearthed Rebecca's skeletal remains, adorned with the silver bracelet gifted to her by her parents on her 20th birthday. The Harrington family witnessed Maxwell's sentencing solemnly, finding closure as justice was finally dispensed. Rebecca's mother clutched her daughter's bracelet, the only memento they could lay to rest after years of uncertainty. The library's demolition was indefinitely postponed, evolving into a site of remembrance and contemplation. Locals tendered flowers at its entrance, paying homage to a life unjustly curtailed and a truth that lay dormant behind a bookshelf, awaiting its revelation. In a poignant twist of fate, it was Rebecca's poignant plea, "I am still here," etched desperately on the walls that ensured her enduring memory and guaranteed that justice, though delayed, would ultimately prevail. Story 13. The tale unfolds in a costume shop on the brink of closure, where remnants of the past were being sold off. Among the relics, a woman stumbled upon a mask resting on a forgotten shelf, its delicate features eerily lifelike. Placing it on the counter, the cashier hesitated, muttering, "That's not ours." Bewildered, she sought a tag but found none. With a nonchalant shrug, she decided to bring it home. As the night draped its veil, a soft murmur stirred her from slumber. The whisper of fabric shifting beckoned her awake. To her astonishment, the mask had vanished from the dresser, now perched upon her nightstand, fixated on her. Catherine Reed, the woman in question, was later discovered by a concerned neighbor. The creak of her ajar front door welcomed the morning light, casting an eerie glow upon the otherwise dim abode. Instead of returning a borrowed book, the neighbor stumbled upon a chilling scene that would perplex investigators for years to come. Catherine lay lifeless on her bedroom floor, the mask mysteriously absent. Detective Morgan arrived on the scene as forensics meticulously documented the haunting tableau. The rhythmic click of shutters accompanied whispered conversations as the investigation unfolded. "No sign of forced entry," noted an officer in his notepad, while the detective absorbed the room's minutiae, her discerning gaze catching every detail. A partially open drawer, a lipstick-stained water glass on the nightstand, everything seemed ordinary except for the frozen terror etched on the deceased's face. The medical examiner, with a solemn expression, declared the cause of death unclear upon initial examination. No visible wounds, no signs of a struggle, only a petrified expression that hinted at unfathomable fear. In life, Catherine Reed was known as a meticulous art appraiser with an eye for authenticity. Colleagues attested to her ability to discern forgeries with uncanny precision. Could this very talent have led to her untimely demise? Security footage from the costume shop unveiled a peculiar occurrence. The cashier's genuine confusion over the mask's origin prompted a visit from the owner, who disavowed any knowledge of it. Unraveling the mystery further, the shop owner disclosed unsettling information about the mask's origins, tied to a collector's estate sale marked by enigmatic circumstances. A breakthrough in the investigation emerged when forensics uncovered microscopic fibers embedded in Catherine's fingertips. Anomalously, these fibers comprised a blend of human hair and an unidentified organic substance, an enigma that eluded all databases. Delving deeper, the investigation unearthed a trail of similar deaths spanning decades, all linked to the acquisition of peculiar masks preceding each victim's demise. Each victim bore the same expression of sheer terror, each case a labyrinth of unanswered questions. A retired detective privy to one such case shared a chilling revelation. Inside each mask, ancient symbols were discovered, hinting at a ritual involving soul transference. A journal clandestinely tucked behind a loose baseboard in Catherine's apartment shed light on her harrowing final days. Her frantic entries detailed a malevolent presence that lurked within the mask, watching her with sinister intent. Connecting the dots between the mask, the mysterious deaths, and the collector's demise, Catherine embarked on a perilous journey of discovery that ultimately sealed her fate. The cause of death, as determined by the medical examiner, was attributed to cardiac arrest induced by overwhelming fear. But what could instill such dread in a soul that their very heart ceased to beat? The investigation took a sinister turn when surveillance footage captured a figure bearing Catherine's likeness emerging from her home in the dead of night, sporting the ominous mask. A mechanical mimicry of her movements hinted at a malevolent force at play. Despite a frantic search for the elusive mask, it resurfaced months later in a vintage shop across the country, vanishing into obscurity once more. The enigma remained unsolved, shrouded in a veil of mystery that defied conventional explanation. The detective, haunted by Catherine's journal, harbored a deep-seated unease that lingered into the night. A chilling reminder of a truth too bizarre for official records, the journal served as a testament to the cyclical nature of the malevolent entity lurking within the mask. As night descends and shadows dance, the specter of the mask looms, biding its time to ensnare another unwitting soul. Its empty gaze fixated on the living, hungering for the essence that dwells behind mortal eyes. A timeless cycle persists, spanning centuries as the mask awaits its next victim, poised to strike when darkness falls once more. Story 14. The gentle current whispered through the stillness of the morning, the water reflecting the tranquility of the world around it. The fisherman's eyes scanned the glassy surface, barely noticing the mysterious object bobbing near the shore. At first glance, it appeared to be a discarded suitcase, perhaps filled with old clothes left behind by careless hands. However, as he ventured closer, a pungent odor assaulted his senses, thick, heavy, undeniable. The case was adorned with chains, its edges tinged with rust from its time in the elements. With a sense of trepidation, the authorities pried it open, only to be met with a horrifying sight. Instead of garments, they discovered strands of hair, fingers frozen in a macabre grip, and at the very bottom, a chilling note whispered, "This isn't the first." Detective Sarah Mercer stood at the edge of the grim scene, her delicate handkerchief pressed against her nose to shield her from the overpowering scent. The victim, a woman in her mid-30s, with dark locks and pallid skin marred by the water's embrace, lay before her. The meticulous medical examiner meticulously documented every detail before the body was tenderly removed from its watery grave. What haunted Mercer most was not the manner of disposal, but the eerie reverence with which the victim had been prepared. Manicured nails, freshly styled hair, dressed in opulent attire. She was not simply discarded here, Mercer murmured softly as she watched the gentle caress of the water against the muddy bank. She was arranged, showcased. The victim was soon identified as Catherine Walsh, a successful real estate agent renowned for her expertise in selling prestigious properties. Divorced, childless, residing alone in an affluent neighborhood, she was described by colleagues as driven, exacting, and fiercely private. Her disappearance had been reported by her assistant when she failed to appear for a crucial showing to potential wealthy clients. She would never have missed that appointment, the assistant vehemently asserted during questioning. That sale was to be her crowning achievement. As investigators delved into Walsh's meticulously ordered modernist abode, they found perfection in every corner. Designer furniture meticulously arranged, surfaces devoid of even a speck of dust. The refrigerator held meticulously labeled meals, the closet housing garments arranged by hue, shoes carefully shielded in protective sheaths. However, a sense of disarray lingered in her home office, a lone drawer slightly ajar. Within it lay a leather-bound journal, its final entry cryptically stating, "He watches once more. Same vehicle, different plates." A digital exploration of Walsh's online correspondence unearthed a curious pattern: numerous messages from unknown sources, all bearing the eerie refrain, "I perceive your flawlessness," sent at precisely the same time on disparate days. Her browsing history revealed searches for home security systems and personal defense gadgets. Mercer connected these findings to the meticulous arrangement of the victim's body, the meticulous presentation. "Our perpetrator is methodical," she confided to her partner. "This was not a crime of passion, but a meticulously planned ritual." A breakthrough emerged unexpectedly when a local pawnshop owner recognized Walsh's distinctive emerald necklace among the items pawned. The individual who had pawned it was a regular Michael Linden, a nondescript maintenance worker. Surveillance footage depicted Linden entering Walsh's building recurrently over several months, sometimes wheeling his maintenance cart, sometimes unaccompanied, always during periods when she would be absent showcasing properties. Upon searching Linden's unassuming dwelling, investigators were met with a chilling sight: walls adorned with photos of Walsh and other women, all sharing striking similarities, all captured without their awareness. Some images were defaced with crimson strikes. Walsh was the third. Behind a concealed panel in his closet lay a shrine, each victim's possessions meticulously laid out: a hairbrush bearing strands of hair, tissues stained with lipstick, receipts, keys. Each assemblage accompanied by a miniature log detailing daily routines, preferences, habits. The interrogation chamber turned frigid as Linden was ushered in. His appearance was immaculate, his voice soft-spoken, belying the darkness within. Confronted with the damning proof, his demeanor remained unchanged. "They were flawed," he eventually uttered, his tone devoid of emotion. "They projected perfection, but I perceived their imperfections. Catherine's left drawer was always unkempt. Her lipstick application was never flawless. Her perfection was a facade." The pursuit of the initial two victims alluded to in his note led authorities to remote locales where two additional suitcases were uncovered. Both contained women resembling Walsh, both real estate agents who touted their perfectionist attention to detail. Throughout Linden's trial, he sat motionless, his countenance vacant as prosecutors delineated his chilling modus operandi. He had stalked each woman meticulously, learning their routines, infiltrating their abodes, studying their lives. Upon claiming them, he corrected what he deemed as their imperfections, tending to their hair, applying makeup with precision, adorning them in their finest attire before extinguishing their lives. The victims' families stood in silence as the judge pronounced a life sentence without the possibility of parole for Linden. For Detective Mercer, the chapter was formally closed, yet enigmas lingered. What had triggered Linden's fixation on these specific women? What perceived blemish within himself had he sought to expunge through his atrocities? As the river meandered along its leisurely course, its waters eventually purged of all traces. In the precinct upon Mercer's desk lay replicas of those chilling journals, testimonies that in the secrecy of ordinary existence, shadows sometimes lurk beneath the facade. And occasionally the most perilous predators are those concealed in plain sight, observing, waiting for a solitary flaw to betray their true nature. Story 15. The worn envelope sat on the detective's desk, its edges tinged with the passage of time, yet the stamp gleamed fresh as if just placed there days ago. With a sense of intrigue, the detective carefully unfolded the envelope. Inside, a single sheet of paper awaited, its message hastily typed in a hurried, uneven font. "I am sorry for what I did," the words whispered off the page. A faint dampness clung to the paper, carrying with it a hint of iron, a metallic echo of the past. It was only upon closer inspection that the detective noticed the reddish smear along the bottom edge, a chilling detail that spoke volumes in silence. Detective Sarah Morgan, with a practiced hand, placed the letter into an evidence bag, her gloved fingers moving with precision born of experience. The forensics team's findings confirmed her suspicions. The reddish stain was indeed human blood, a macabre connection to an unsolved homicide case that had cast a shadow over the department for years. The victim, a young journalist named Rebecca Warren, had been discovered in her apartment, a tragic canvas of stab wounds telling a tale of violence. Her missing laptop, scattered notes, all whispered of a story left unfinished. a life cut short in pursuit of the truth. The arrival of the letter at the police department, a cryptic message addressed simply to the homicide division, stirred a dormant investigation back to life. The paper and envelope yielded few fingerprints, only ghostly smudges hinting at the sender's caution. The postmark, a breadcrumb in the vast expanse of a mystery, offered a slender thread to follow. Gathering her team in the dimly lit briefing room, Detective Morgan pinned the image of the letter at the heart of a cluttered board adorned with the ghosts of investigations past. "This changes everything," she murmured to the room, her voice a whisper in the stillness. "Our killer reveals a crack in their facade, a glimpse of remorse." Detective James Chen, a steadfast presence at Morgan's side, cast a shadow of doubt. "Or a carefully crafted illusion," he suggested, the dance of light and shadow playing across his features. "A theatrical ploy to lure us into their web." The forensics team, diligent in their pursuit of truth, traced the unique typewriter impressions to a long-forgotten model, a relic of bygone days. Rare but not beyond reach. The hunt began, a winding path leading to antique shops, collectors, each step a heartbeat closer to the unknown. As the investigation unfurled its tendrils, the detectives delved into Rebecca's world, a tapestry of secrets and shadows. Her editor painted a portrait of a journalist unyielding in her pursuit of justice, a seeker of truth amid a sea of lies. Her latest assignment, a tangled web of wealth and power, hinted at motives obscured by veils of deception. Interviewing Rebecca's boyfriend, Michael Barnes, revealed cracks in a facade once thought solid. His unease, a tremor beneath the surface, hinted at truths left unspoken. Rebecca spoke of shadows, he confessed, the weight of hindsight heavy in his words. "I should have listened, should have seen the danger lurking in the corners." As the detectives followed the twisting path of clues, a second letter arrived, a mirror of the first in its eerie familiarity. The message, a whispered confession of guilt, sent shivers down spines already chilled by the specter of the unknown. She knew too much, the words echoed, a haunting refrain of secrets laid bare. The mansion of the deceased patriarch loomed large in their sights, a bastion of privilege and power cloaked in shadows. Interviews with the family, each member a player in a deadly game, revealed truths hidden beneath layers of deceit. Richard, the eldest son, with his polished veneer and hidden chambers, emerged as a figure of suspicion. A breakthrough born of diligence and chance came with the discovery of microscopic fibers on the envelopes, a silent witness to betrayal. Eleanor, the youngest daughter, her voice a tremor of truth, revealed a tangled web of lies spun by those closest to her. Richard's facade crumbled in the face of evidence, his carefully constructed world unraveling at the seams. The final act played out with a symphony of justice, each note a step closer to resolution. Michael's confession, a shard of light in the darkness, laid bare the truth of a conspiracy woven in shadows. Eleanor's recording, a dagger aimed at the heart of deceit, sealed the fate of those who believed themselves untouchable. As Richard's conviction echoed through the courtroom, a sense of closure settled over the room, a balm for wounds long left to fester. Detective Morgan, a silent guardian in the shadows, approached Rebecca's parents with a quiet solace, a shared understanding of loss and justice intertwined. The blood-stained letters, remnants of a past best left forgotten, found their place in evidence storage, a silent testament to the fragility of secrets and the weight of guilt. The case of Rebecca Warren, a tapestry of darkness and light, served as a beacon for new detectives, a reminder that even the most carefully laid plans can crumble in the face of truth, and that redemption in its many forms waits patiently in the shadows of the unknown. Story 16. In the quiet stillness of the old apartment, the sounds of the heating system groaning and the pipes rattling were like familiar lullabies, soothing in their predictability. Or so she believed. That was until a soft, eerie voice began to filter through the vents, barely audible yet undeniably present. It wasn't the typical background noise of neighboring conversations. It was a whisper, calling out her name in a hauntingly gentle tone. Intrigued and unnerved, she leaned in closer, pressing her ear against the cool metal grate, her heart quickening with each passing moment. A chill breeze brushed against her cheek, carrying with it a message that seemed to dance on the edges of reality. I know you're listening. Detective Morgan Shaw found herself standing silently in the midst of the vacant apartment, her gaze fixed upon the rusted vent cover that had been pried open. Around her, the forensics team moved with precision, capturing every detail with their flashing cameras. The missing woman, Alina Reeves, had been absent for a week before the discovery was made, the scent of decay finally alerting the building's manager. What they uncovered within the ventilation system defied logic. Officer Patel, his voice steady, recounted the victim's claims of hearing voices through the vents, dismissed by building management as mere quirks of an old building. Shaw knelt by the vent, observing the deep scratches around its edges, a silent testament to a desperate struggle. As she traced the marks with her gloved fingers, a realization dawned upon her. The frantic gouges seemed to tell a tale of someone trapped inside, seeking escape. Alina had been a beloved figure in her community, a teacher whose absence was keenly felt by her students and loved ones. Her disappearance had been preceded by a growing sense of paranoia, a belief that unseen eyes were watching her, whispering through the very walls of her home. Shaw listened intently as Alina's sister recounted the unsettling details during their interview, her voice trembling with a mixture of grief and fear. Examining the apartment anew, Shaw noticed the subtle clues left behind a chair positioned beneath the vent, the meticulous arrangement of the room, as if someone had been listening intently, waiting for a response. The forensic analysis revealed chilling connections, fibers matching Alina's clothing, a foreign fingerprint on the vent cover, and most disturbingly, audio recordings from Alina's phone capturing whispered conversations that seemed to defy explanation. Delving deeper into the history of the building, Shaw uncovered a pattern of former tenants fleeing the premises, citing strange noises and unsettling experiences. The building superintendent, Harold Weber, maintained a facade of indifference, brushing off concerns with a dismissive wave. However, his demeanor shifted when questioned about the occupants of apartment 4B, a flicker of unease betraying his stoic facade. The investigation took a sinister turn as a hidden access panel was discovered in Alina's bathroom, leading to a secret passage within the walls, a shadowy realm where someone had lurked, unseen and unheard. Traces of a clandestine presence emerged, a stash of essentials, remnants of a covert existence thriving in the building's hidden recesses. Weber's meticulously organized computer files unveiled a chilling reality: his obsession with those he watched, the twisted intimacy he cultivated through stolen moments and illicit glimpses. Shaw's stomach churned as she uncovered the extent of his voyeurism, a digital diary detailing his descent into madness, his belief in a shared connection with his victims. The arrest of Weber shed light on a macabre truth. Alina had been lured into the ventilation system, drugged and disoriented, her final moments a harrowing journey through the metallic maze that whispered promises of sanctuary. The revelation sent shockwaves through the community as other families stepped forward with their own tales of unease and loss. As the trial unfolded, Shaw bore witness to Weber's chilling charisma, his delusions clashing with the stark evidence of his calculated actions. The jury's swift verdict echoed through the courtroom, condemning Weber for his crimes against innocence, his hollow assurances of continued presence, a haunting reminder of the darkness that lurked within the walls. The once bustling apartment building now stands silent and empty, a ghostly reminder of the horrors that unfolded within its walls. Despite attempts at renovation and renewal, the whispers persist, carried on the creaking pipes and shifting winds. Residents speak in hushed tones of voices that echo through the vents, of shadows that move unseen in the stillness of the night. The building holds its secrets close, a silent witness to a tale of obsession and tragedy that refuses to fade into the realm of forgotten memories. Story 17, The Enigmatic Victorian. She crossed the threshold, the dust dancing in the stagnant air around her. The abandoned Victorian stood frozen in time, its peeling walls and shrouded furniture telling tales of neglect. Every room she entered felt like a loop, a never-ending cycle leading her back to the parlor. The doors, regardless of her choice, all brought her back to the same starting point. A peculiar mystery shrouded the house, trapping her within its walls. And when she sought to leave, the front door had vanished, leaving her stranded in a maze of rooms. Detective Sarah Lind surveyed the scene where Morgan Pierce's body had been found. The once curious Victorian had now turned into a crime scene, with technicians moving quietly through the shadows like specters. Whispers of the house's eerie reputation lingered in the air, tales of compasses spinning wildly and unseen eyes watching from hidden corners. But the truth within those walls was far darker than mere folklore. The medical examiner's hushed voice revealed the grim details of Morgan's demise. Seated in the parlor, she appeared serene, as if awaiting a guest that would never arrive. No struggle, no signs of violence, just a haunting stillness that unsettled even the most seasoned investigators. The house held secrets that defied logic and reason, secrets that beckoned those who dared to uncover them. As Lynn delved deeper into the case, a tangled web of intrigue unfurled. Morgan, a studious researcher fascinated by architectural anomalies, had been drawn to the Victorian's enigmatic allure. Her journal spoke of strange phenomena, doors leading to ever-shifting rooms, unexplained cold spots, and mysterious echoes that seemed to defy natural laws. But it was the discovery of a rare alkaloid in her system that added a sinister twist to the investigation. Questions arose, suspicions deepened. Who was Morgan communicating with about the house's mysteries, and what dark forces lurked within its walls, unseen yet ever present? Adam Reeves, an expert in architectural history, emerged as a key figure in the unfolding drama. His connection to Morgan hinted at a deeper understanding of the house's secrets, a knowledge that could either illuminate the truth or plunge them further into darkness. But even his alibi could not shield him from the shadows that haunted the Victorian's halls. A revelation from Alina Blackwood's grandson cracked open the case, unveiling a legacy of tragedy hidden within the house's history. The Blackwood family secret, known as the Claiming, shed light on a pattern of deaths that spanned generations. Individuals drawn to the house's mysterious allure ultimately succumbed to its insidious influence, their fates sealed within its deceptive confines. A hidden chamber behind the parlor fireplace revealed ancient artifacts linked to liminal spaces, gateways between worlds where reality blurred and ancient powers dwelled. The carved figurine at the center whispered of forgotten gods and forbidden knowledge, its presence a harbinger of darker truths yet to be uncovered. And as the investigation deepened, a chilling revelation emerged: someone else had been present when Morgan met her end. Unidentified fingerprints, traces of the alkaloid, a web of deceit and manipulation that stretched beyond the confines of the physical world. The final act unfolded with tragic inevitability, as Adam Reeves met the same fate as Morgan, his body a silent testament to the house's insidious hold. A key, a cryptic email, a final plea for understanding all pieces of a puzzle that defied easy solutions, that blurred the line between reality and nightmare. The case, officially unresolved, lingered like a ghost in the shadows of the condemned Victorian. Whispers of lights flickering in the night, of visitors who entered but never emerged, painted a portrait of a house that hungered for souls, that craved those who sought to unravel its mysteries. Some said the house claimed those who delved too deep, who dared to peer into the abyss of the unknown. Others whispered of ancient powers, of forgotten deities who walked the threshold between worlds, waiting for the unwary to stumble into their domain. And so the truth remained elusive, a mirage shimmering on the edge of perception. In a house where all doors led back to the beginning, where time stood still and reality warped, the enigma of the Victorian endured, a riddle waiting to be solved by those brave enough to seek the answers hidden within its walls. Story 18. In the quiet of the night, a faint flicker danced across the baby monitor screen, like a ghostly visitor passing through the digital realm. The mother, half asleep, brushed it off as a fleeting glitch, a mere hiccup in the machinery. But then the crackling static filled the air, and a voice, soft and sinister, whispered, "SHHH, go back to sleep." A chill crept up her spine, her every nerve tingling with unease. With a racing heart, she hurried to her son's room, the darkness pressing in around her. Upon reaching the nursery, her eyes widened in horror. The crib stood empty, a gaping void where her precious child should have been. The window remained shut, the door securely locked. The only anomaly in the room was a stuffed rabbit lying abandoned on the floor, its unblinking black eyes fixed on her with an unsettling gaze. Rebecca's scream pierced the night, a raw, primal sound that echoed through the walls and into the souls of the neighbors who stirred from their slumber. Emergency services were summoned, lights flashing in the darkness as help arrived. There on the nursery floor they found Rebecca, cradling the stuffed rabbit, her world shattered into a million fractured pieces. Samuel, her infant son, had vanished without a trace, leaving behind a void that no amount of searching could fill. The investigation that followed was shrouded in mystery, a puzzle with missing pieces that refused to be found. No forced entry marred the home, no alarms were triggered in the dead of night. The baby monitor footage, once a source of comfort, now held only the haunting memory of that whispered command and the crackling static that followed. Suspicions turned toward Rebecca, her grief-stricken facade scrutinized under the harsh light of interrogation. Her husband, Daniel, returned from his business trip, a cloud of tension hanging heavy between them. Whispers of postpartum depression lingered in the air, casting shadows of doubt upon a mother's shattered heart. But then a glimmer of hope, a thread of truth woven into the tapestry of deception. Microscopic fibers, unseen to the naked eye, clung to the nursery windowsill, a silent witness to an intruder's stealthy entry. A rare type of climbing rope, a whisper of expertise in the art of infiltration, hinted at a shadowy figure scaling the walls in the dead of night. As the focus shifted, Daniel's pastime of rock climbing came under scrutiny, his hands bearing the telltale signs of a climber's journey. A web of deceit unfurled before the investigators, revealing a man with secrets buried deep beneath the surface. A second family, a web of lies spun over years, a plan meticulously crafted in the shadows of betrayal. The baby monitor, once a tool of reassurance, now emerged as a key player in the twisted tale. Hacked, manipulated, its innocent signal twisted into a weapon of deception. The voice that whispered in the night was not a phantom from within, but a transmission from the depths of betrayal. In a basement beneath the veneer of normalcy, Samuel was found, cradled in the arms of a woman named Elaine. A connection forged in pain and loss, in the echoes of a past that refused to be forgotten. The truth, like a dagger unsheathed, pierced through the veil of lies, laying bare the dark heart of the conspiracy. The trial was a spectacle of shadows and light, of whispered confessions and silent betrayals. The audio from the baby monitor echoed through the courtroom, a haunting reminder of a night that would never be forgotten. Daniel's cough, a damning echo of guilt, sealed his fate alongside Elaine as justice cast its long shadow over their intertwined destinies. Rebecca and Samuel found solace in a new beginning, a fresh chapter untainted by the shadows of the past. The stuffed rabbit, a silent witness to their shared ordeal, remained tucked away, a reminder of a night when the darkness threatened to consume them whole. As the world moved on, the echoes of that fateful night lingered in the air, a cautionary tale of betrayal and redemption, of shadows that lurk in the quietest corners of the night. And in the stillness of the nursery, the baby monitor stood sentinel, a guardian of truths untold, its silent vigil a testament to the resilience of a mother's love. Story 19. The ancient box lay hidden beneath layers of clutter in the attic, a forgotten treasure left behind by the house's former inhabitants. Within its depths were aged Polaroids, capturing moments of joy and celebration, a typical sight, harmless until she reached the final photograph. It depicted her very own living room, the familiar couch, the familiar curtains. Yet the family present was not hers, and lurking in the background, barely discernible in the dimness, stood a figure in the hallway watching. Rebecca shivered as she scrutinized the picture, her fingers quivering slightly, causing the edges of the Polaroid to tremble. The family in the photo, a woman with honey blonde locks, a man with thick-rimmed glasses, and two children beamed at the camera, oblivious to the shadowy figure looming behind them, their smiles frozen in time, unaware of the looming danger nearby. She descended the creaking wooden steps, carrying the photograph in her hands. The house, always too vast, too desolate since she had moved in 4 months ago, now felt oppressive. Placing the photo on her kitchen counter, she gazed at it under the harsh fluorescent light. The resemblance was uncanny, the archway leading to the hallway, the unique crown molding, the bay window welcoming the morning sun. This was her home, yet these faces were strangers. The detective arrived, clad in a worn leather jacket that bore witness to numerous crime scenes. Detective Morgan possessed eyes that missed nothing, methodically studying the photograph. Running a gloved finger along the Polaroid's edge, he turned it over to reveal the blank back. "What do you know about the family who sold you this house, the Nelsons?" His voice rumbled low. "Very little," Rebecca confessed. The sale was handled by a real estate agent. They had already relocated out of state. Morgan nodded, his demeanor revealing nothing. "May I take this? Our team might be able to identify the family in this photo." The investigation commenced quietly. Rebecca discovered that the Nelsons had acquired the house from a family named Crawford. The Crawfords had resided there for 7 years before a sudden departure. Prior to them, the Mornos had owned the property for nearly a decade. Detective Morgan delved into property records, interviewed former neighbors, and pieced together a timeline of past residents. A breakthrough arrived unexpectedly. A former mail carrier identified the family in the photo. "That's the Sutherlands," he stated with certainty. "They lived in that house for merely a year before vanishing. Mail piled up and they left without a trace. The Sutherland family had disappeared without a trace. 4 individuals gone, no forwarding address. No evidence of the children enrolling in new schools. Their cars never found, bank accounts untouched, as though they had evaporated into thin air. Forensic examination dated the Polaroid to approximately 15 years earlier. The technician pointed out minute details in the image, the peculiar arrangement of dust particles, the eerie stillness of the subjects. This was captured using a timer, she elucidated. Observe how they are all positioned perfectly. Someone set the camera, then hurried into play. But if the Sutherlands had set up the camera, who was the enigmatic figure in the hallway? Enhanced imaging disclosed further details about the shadowy presence. Tall, male, clad in dark attire. His countenance obscured, yet his stance indicated a vigilant observer. Stationary, as though he belonged there, as though he had every right to inhabit that space. Detective Morgan uncovered a pattern. Preceding the Sutherlands, another family had dwelt in the house for precisely 1 year before disappearing, and before them another. 5 families over 5 years, all vanishing without explanation, always after a year of residence. Rebecca had been in the house for 4 months. The investigation unearthed historical building records. The house was constructed by a distinguished architect with an impeccable reputation, yet the project manager had vanished near completion. Samuel Whitfield, his replacement, had finalized the construction. Police archives contained a solitary photo of Whitfield, a tall, lean man with sunken cheeks and piercing eyes. When aged digitally and juxtaposed with the figure in the Polaroid, the resemblance was undeniable. However, Samuel Whitfield reportedly perished in a construction mishap shortly after completing the house. His body never recovered from the collapsed foundation of another site. The basement became the focal point of the inquiry. Ground-penetrating radar unveiled anomalies beneath the concrete floor, inconsistencies in density that shouldn't exist. When the jackhammers breached the surface, a pungent odor assaulted their senses. Beneath layers of concrete and dirt, they discovered them. Not solely the Sutherlands, all of them. Every vanished family, perfectly preserved in the cool, dry earth. Among their belongings was a camera. The same camera that had taken the Polaroid discovered in the attic, and numerous more photographs, each showcasing a different family, smiles frozen, oblivious to the lurking figure in the shadows. The house was cordoned off as a crime scene. Rebecca would never return. While investigators documented evidence, they stumbled upon a concealed crawlspace in the attic, concealed behind a false wall. Within lay a small cot, photography equipment, and a journal brimming with meticulous observations of the former inhabitants. The final entry, dated a mere 3 days earlier, read, "The new one is different. She found my photograph too soon. I'll need to hasten my schedule." Rebecca relocated to a hotel under police safeguard. During the night, her slumber disrupted by a call. Answering, she heard only breaths, then a click succeeded by the mechanical whir of a Polaroid camera snapping a photo. The investigation endures to this day. The house stands vacant, its windows dark, its enigmas not entirely unveiled. Samuel Whitfield remains untraceable, if that was indeed his true identity. Some investigators theorize he perished decades ago, while others assert he simply moved on to a new locale, a new persona, a new residence. And somewhere in a dim chamber, photographs are materializing new families, new homes, new watchers in the shadows. The sole certainty is that those who pursue the truth about the man in the photo are now under watchful eyes themselves. Story 20, The Enigmatic Doll. In the dimly lit attic of their newly acquired Victorian house, Sarah and Michael stumbled upon a hidden treasure, a porcelain doll, nestled beneath a worn and forgotten blanket. Its delicate features, framed by wisps of time, gazed back at them with wide, unblinking blue eyes. A relic of a bygone era, a silent guardian of secrets long buried. At first, they dismissed it as just another dusty relic of the past, a forgotten keepsake left to gather dust. They chuckled at its eerie presence, attributing it to the eccentricities of old homes. Little did they know, the doll's porcelain gaze held mysteries far deeper than they could fathom. That night, as the world outside slumbered in peaceful ignorance, an unsettling stillness descended upon the house. The air grew heavy, pregnant with unspoken whispers, and the silence stretched like a taut thread waiting to unravel. Sarah and Michael, unaware of the unseen forces at play, retired to their bed, unaware of the watchful eyes that followed their every move. With the first light of dawn, a subtle shift occurred. The doll, once nestled in the attic's shadows, now perched ominously at the foot of their bed, a silent sentinel bearing witness to the unfolding drama. Detective Rachel Winters, a seasoned investigator with a keen eye for the enigmatic, received a cryptic call on a crisp autumn morning. The scene she encountered in the master bedroom sent shivers down her spine. A female victim, her body contorted into an unnatural pose, her eyes frozen in a silent scream of terror. Nearby, the male victim lay sprawled in the hallway, a futile attempt at escape etched on his lifeless face. As Detective Winters delved deeper into the mystery, a chilling realization dawned upon her. The crime scene bore a haunting resemblance to a macabre puppet show, orchestrated by an unseen mastermind with a penchant for the theatrical. The victims, mere players in a sinister game beyond their comprehension. The whispers of the past echoed through the halls of the Victorian house, each creaking floorboard a testament to the hidden histories that lurked within its walls. Tales of previous owners meeting tragic fates under mysterious circumstances, their lives cut short by forces beyond mortal reckoning. The forensic team, diligent in their pursuit of truth, uncovered a trail of clues that led back to the attic, the heart of the mystery. Microscopic fibers, remnants of a bygone era, hinted at a connection to the doll that now held sway over the house. Antique fabrics, once lovingly stitched into doll clothes, now served as silent witnesses to the unfolding tragedy. As Detective Winters pieced together the fragments of the past, a pattern emerged, a pattern of souls intertwined with the house, bound by threads of fate that defied reason. The doll, a harbinger of misfortune, stood at the center of it all, its porcelain visage a mask for the malevolent forces that sought to claim the unsuspecting. In the depths of the attic, hidden from prying eyes, lay a trove of secrets waiting to be unearthed. Old photographs, faded with time, revealed the doll maker and his creations, each imbued with a life of its own. Among them, a doll identical to the one found by Sarah and Michael, its presence a harbinger of doom. As the investigation delved into the murky waters of the occult, a chilling truth emerged. The doll maker, a master of his craft, had dabbled in forbidden arts, binding spirits to his creations in a bid to transcend mortality. The doll, a vessel for ancient energies, a conduit for forces beyond human comprehension. The veil between the worlds grew thin, and Detective Winters found herself standing at the crossroads of reality and nightmare. The doll, a silent witness to the unfolding drama, held the key to a mystery that defied logic and reason. In the end, the doll remained elusive, slipping through the fingers of justice like a wisp of smoke. Its legacy, a whispered tale of tragedy and loss, haunted the halls of the Victorian house long after its troubled past had faded into obscurity. And so the house stood silent, its secrets buried deep within its walls, waiting for the curious and the brave to unlock its mysteries. And on quiet nights when the world slumbered in blissful ignorance, a small shadow would dance behind the attic window, a reminder of the spectral presence that lingered in the shadows, watching, waiting, and whispering its timeless secrets. Story 21. In a small town, there existed a mysterious house at the edge of the woods, shrouded in secrecy and silence. It stood abandoned, its windows dark, its porch weary from the weight of time. None in the town claimed ownership of it, and its origins faded into the past like whispers in the wind. The locals never spoke of it, as if pretending it didn't exist would make it so. One day, a group of hikers ventured too close to the enigmatic house. As they peered at its weathered facade, they noticed something peculiar, names etched into the wooden siding, carved deep as if to warn trespassers. Among the list of names, one stood out fresh and untouched by the elements, a name unfamiliar to any of the hikers. A name that sent shivers down their spines when one of them recognized it as their own. As night fell, a call came into the local dispatch, reporting a mere trespassing incident. Mason Wright, the hiker who discovered his name on the house, spoke of the unsettling discovery. Law enforcement initially brushed it off as a prank, expecting nothing more than teenage mischief. However, what unfolded defied all rational explanation. Detective Sarah Keller arrived at the scene as darkness cloaked the surrounding forest. Her flashlight pierced the shadows, revealing the eerie sight of 27 names carved into the wall of the house. Some names had faded with time, blending into the aged wood, while others appeared freshly engraved. And at the bottom of the list, Mason Wright's name stood out, the cut still raw with sawdust remnants. Mason, bewildered and chilled to the bone, insisted he had never set foot near the house before. He couldn't fathom how his name ended up on that ominous wall of names. The investigation took a sinister turn as background checks on each name uncovered a chilling truth. Every name belonged to someone reported missing over the past 40 years. All hikers who had vanished without a trace while exploring the woods alone. Forensic experts meticulously documented the carvings, noting the differences in depth, style, and weathering. The oldest name, Rebecca Hansen, linked to a case from decades ago, describing a young woman who ventured into the woods and never returned, leaving behind only a solitary hiking boot by a stream. As Detective Keller delved deeper into the mystery, she interrogated Mason extensively, but his story remained consistent. The focus then shifted to his companions, leading to a disturbing revelation in the photographs taken during their hike. A shadowy figure resembling a tall, slender man lurked in the background of multiple images, unseen by the hikers during their journey. Ordered to search the interior of the abandoned house, officers stumbled upon a chilling discovery in the basement. Personal belongings of the missing hikers were meticulously arranged on shelves: watches, backpacks, cameras, wallets, all labeled with corresponding names from the wall outside. Bloodstains, concealed over the years, hinted at sinister activities that had taken place within those walls. As the investigation progressed, Mason reported escalating occurrences of paranoia and unease, claiming to be stalked by unseen entities. The revelation of the house's previous owner, a reclusive hunter named Victor Blackwood, shed light on the dark history surrounding the property. Blackwood's journal revealed disturbing details of his predatory nature, viewing humans as prey to be hunted and collected. A manhunt for Blackwood ensued, but he remained elusive, evading capture despite extensive search efforts. Mason's sudden disappearance, along with a cryptic message left behind, added a new layer of dread to the unfolding mystery. The search for Mason and the forensic technician continued fruitlessly as law enforcement raced against time to prevent further disappearances. Hidden within the depths of the house, a workshop concealed tools of sinister intent, hinting at a malevolent force at work. Surveillance measures were heightened, and a trap was set to capture the elusive figure haunting the forest. Yet when the moment arrived, the figure vanished into the night, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and lingering fear. To this day, the abandoned house stands under constant watch. a haunting reminder of the unsolved mysteries that lurk within its walls. The names on the wall serve as a grim testament to those who vanished without a trace, their fates intertwined with the darkness that envelopes the forest. Whispers of the house's grim legacy echo among the townsfolk, a warning to those who dare to tread too close, for the house at the edge of the woods guards its secrets with a silent, chilling presence. Story 22. In the stillness of the night, a parcel arrived in the mail, shrouded in mystery. Wrapped in a plain envelope with no return address, it held a solitary brass key, its surface weathered by the hands of time. The homeowner, a woman named Sarah Miller, gazed at the key, feeling a strange sense of déjà vu wash over her. Though unfamiliar, there was an inexplicable familiarity that tugged at the edges of her consciousness. Curiosity piqued, Sarah attempted to fit the key into every lock within her home, but each one remained unmoved by its touch. It did not belong to her world. Perplexed, she placed the key gently on the polished surface of her coffee table. And in that moment, a haunting sound filled the air. The old grandfather clock in the hallway, long silent and broken, let out a single, mournful chime that reverberated through the empty corridors. Alarmed by the inexplicable event, Sarah reported the occurrence to the local authorities, her voice laced with a quiet unease. What began as a simple tale of a misplaced key soon unfurled into a web of darkness that gripped the tranquil suburban neighborhood in fear. The responding officer, his skepticism evident, initially brushed off Sarah's concerns as mere happenstance, a key sent in error, a trivial mistake. But Sarah, her intuition sharp as a blade, insisted that something was amiss, a shadow lurking beneath the surface. Reluctantly, the officer accepted the key as evidence, sealing it within a small evidence bag that would become a linchpin in an unfolding saga of horror. Enter Detective Robert Harmon, a seasoned investigator with the Special Victims Unit, his gaze piercing as he delved into the enigmatic case. The brass key sat upon his desk, unassuming yet radiating a quiet malevolence that sent shivers down his spine. Investigative threads led to Sarah, a retired high school English teacher with a life steeped in ordinary rhythms. Background checks revealed no hint of malice in her past, a widow with children scattered across the vast expanse of the country. Her life appeared to be a tapestry of innocence, untouched by the darkness that now encroached upon her doorstep. Forensic examinations yielded little. The key bore only Sarah's fingerprints, the envelope offering no clues save for a nondescript postmark. The key itself, a standard Schlage, spoke of mundane origins, though its journey held whispered secrets of a more sinister nature. A breakthrough emerged when Detective Harmon decided to trace the key's unique pattern through the annals of the department's database. A cold case, dormant for 7 long years, bore the imprint of an identical key, a key that unlocked a storage unit teeming with the echoes of unspeakable horrors. Blood-stained carpets, sharp cutting tools, and haunting photographs of women, their faces frozen in unconscious repose. The original investigation had faltered, shackled by the absence of concrete evidence to unmask the perpetrator. Dusty case files revealed a web of deception woven by a shadowy figure, a phantom who had slipped through the cracks of justice. Sarah, drawn deeper into the maelstrom of darkness, fortified her home with new locks and a vigilant security system. The lingering question hung heavy in the air: why had this key found its way to her, a mere bystander in a macabre play orchestrated by a malevolent hand? A fresh analysis breathed life into the dormant case, leading investigators down a winding path of familial ties and hidden truths. A faint genetic thread emerged, linking the key's origins to a man named Harold Jenkins, a specter from Sarah's past who had once dwelled in the shadows of her quiet existence. Harold Jenkins, a name that sent ripples of dread through the hearts of those who knew him, a man of transient movements and veiled intentions. The hunt intensified, the shadows of the past converging with the present in a dance of darkness and light. The true horror unfurled when a desolate cabin, a relic of Jenkins' past, revealed a chamber of secrets buried beneath its floorboards. Rows of identical brass keys, each bearing a name and a date etched upon a small tag, whispered tales of lives extinguished in the dead of night. 5 keys unlocked the tragic fates of women long lost to the annals of time, while 27 more stood as silent sentinels to the unknown victims who had crossed paths with a predator in human guise. Forensic teams toiled tirelessly, unearthing the remnants of shattered lives buried in the earth behind the cabin. The soil yielded its grim harvest, a chilling tableau of unspeakable atrocities that echoed through the silent woods. Sarah, cloaked in a mantle of protection, watched from afar as the manhunt for Jenkins unfurled across the nation. Behavioral analysts wove a tapestry of motives, a twisted invitation, a dark accolade bestowed upon an unwitting recipient. The press christened him the Keymaster, a name that echoed through the corridors of fear and disbelief. The community quivered in the wake of revelations, grappling with the realization that monsters often wore the masks of ordinary men. As the hunt intensified, a lone figure bearing the weight of his sins eluded capture in the wilderness. A wildlife photographer, a mere observer in the grand tapestry of fate, captured a fleeting image, the ghost of Jenkins, a specter adrift in the sea of shadows. Authorities closed ranks, encircling the fugitive in a net of steel and determination. Tactical teams braved treacherous terrain, guided by the flickering light of justice that beckoned in the distance. The final act played out in a crescendo of tragedy. A solitary figure, haunted by his deeds, met his end in a desolate tower, his final words etched in ink upon a journal of horrors. The truth unfurled in all its grotesque splendor, a catalogue of lives extinguished, a symphony of suffering etched in blood and bone. Sarah, a mere pawn in the game of fate, bore witness to the unveiling of unspeakable darkness that had brushed so close to her fragile existence. The grandfather clock, once a harbinger of mystery, now stood as a silent sentinel to the horrors that had unfolded within its midst. Jenkins' gaze, a specter that had haunted her in the shadows, now relegated to the annals of history. And in the stillness of the night, a collection of brass keys lay dormant in an evidence locker, a silent testament to the lives lost, the souls extinguished, the darkness that lurked behind the facade of normalcy. Each key a whisper of sorrow, a harbinger of tragedy, a reminder that sometimes the most chilling horrors dwell in the hearts of those we least expect. Story 23. The tale began when the new homeowners, Daniel and Meredith Parker, noticed a peculiar occurrence in their Victorian manor. Late at night, the old intercom system crackled with mysterious whispers, a relic from a bygone era, now a forgotten feature of the renovated home. Despite the oddity, the couple found charm in this vintage connection between rooms, a nod to the past they admired. One fateful night, curiosity got the best of Daniel. He pressed the intercom button, and to his surprise, a whisper echoed through the speaker, chilling him to the core. "Why did you come back?" The words hung in the air, unnerving and unexpected. Startled, Daniel turned to his wife, only to hear her deny ever speaking those haunting words. Detective Sarah Reeves was summoned to the manor, her unmarked vehicle crunching gravel as she arrived. The call had hinted at a possible break-in, but as she entered the dimly lit foyer, it was clear there was more to uncover. Daniel, visibly shaken, recounted the strange events revolving around the intercom, leading Detective Reeves through the shadowed halls of the grand estate. Meredith sat in the living room, her grip tight on a mug, her expression tense. Without preamble, she revealed a startling discovery hidden behind a wall, a small leather-bound journal belonging to Alina, the previous owner. The entries painted a haunting picture of Alina's fear of her husband, Vincent, and her subsequent disappearance 30 years prior. The investigation delved deeper, unearthing the dark secrets of the house's past. Vincent Blackwood, the former owner, had meticulously staged Alina's vanishing act, living a lie for decades. Beneath the garden shed, human remains were found, confirming Alina's tragic fate at the hands of her husband. Vincent's confession sent shivers down Detective Reeves' spine as he nonchalantly revealed his sinister motives, driven by a desire for silence and control. His calculated deception crumbled under the weight of evidence, leading to a swift trial where he pled guilty to murder. The house, now tainted by its history, was sold by the Parkers, unable to bear the weight of its dark past. Before bidding farewell, they held a solemn memorial for Alina, finally giving her the recognition she deserved. The garden, once a burial ground, was now a place of peace and remembrance. As time passed, the intercom system was dismantled by new owners, its whispers fading into memory. But Detective Reeves couldn't shake the feeling that the house held more secrets, that its walls whispered of the past. Driving by the property, she would slow down, catching faint echoes on the wind, a reminder of the house that answered back. And so the old Victorian manor stood, a silent witness to the echoes of tragedy and the quiet justice that eventually prevailed, a story whispered in the rustle of leaves and the creak of floorboards, a mystery that lingered in the night like a lullaby, inviting all who listened to drift into dreams. Story 24. The apartment had sat in silence for months, a quiet witness to the passage of time. When the new tenants crossed its threshold, their expectations were tempered, perhaps a layer of dust, a few abandoned remnants of a past life. Yet one door stood stubbornly closed, defying their efforts to coax it open. It was a closet, locked from within, harboring its secrets behind solid wood. With a final, resolute push, the landlord breached the barrier, revealing a sight that sent a shiver down the spine. The walls bore the scars of desperation, etched deep and jagged into the very essence of the room. Each scratch told a story of struggle, of a soul fighting against the confines of darkness. And nestled in the corner, an ancient relic lay dormant, a flip phone, its screen aglow with a single, haunting message left unread. Detective Morgan Shaw, a seasoned investigator with a keen eye for the enigmatic, felt a chill creep down her spine as she surveyed the scene. It wasn't the presence of blood or violence that unsettled her, but the silent plea echoed in those scratch marks, a silent scream for freedom, for escape. "We need forensics here now," she instructed her partner, Officer Reed, whose camera clicked in a rhythm of documentation. "And bring me the records of the previous tenants." The cryptic message on the phone whispered of ominous knowledge, a shadow of a past that refused to remain buried. The landlord, his demeanor nervous and evasive, spoke of a tenant who had vanished without a trace, a young woman, solitary in her nature, who had left behind unanswered questions. Forensic analysis unveiled a tapestry of DNA woven into the fabric of the walls. Most threads led back to a single source, the missing tenant, Emma Caldwell, whose absence had raised alarms in the outside world. But among the genetic tapestry, two anomalies emerged, one a mystery, the other a ghost from the past. Shaw's brow furrowed in confusion as she delved into the depths of the investigative puzzle. Derek Mercer, a man presumed dead for years, had left behind a spectral imprint on the closet walls, defying the laws of mortality. The pieces of the narrative began to coalesce, painting a portrait of interrupted lives and unanswered questions. Emma's apartment whispered of a life abruptly halted, unopened mail, a cold mug of coffee, a bed meticulously arranged. Phone records hinted at a sudden silence, punctuated by the persistent buzz of an unknown caller. A pattern emerged, a shadow dance of secrets and hidden truths. As the investigation unfurled its tendrils, a dark figure emerged from the shadows, a man in a baseball cap, his features obscured by design, trailing in the wake of Emma's movements. Surveillance footage wove a tale of clandestine encounters, of a predator stalking his prey in the cloak of night. The revelation of fingerprints imprinted on the threshold of the closet shattered the illusion of Derek Mercer's demise. Shaw's mind raced, connecting the dots of a sinister web that spanned beyond the confines of a single apartment. A missing persons case, long forgotten, breathed new life as Lynette Porter emerged from the depths of captivity, her eyes haunted by the specter of her tormentor. The pieces of the puzzle locked into place, revealing a tapestry of horror woven by a master manipulator. Mercer's trail of deception led to a final showdown, a confrontation tinged with the echoes of shattered lives. As the handcuffs closed around his wrists, his gaze held a chilling calm, a veneer of control that masked a wellspring of darkness. The trial unveiled the intricate threads of Mercer's deception, his elaborate schemes to evade justice and inflict his twisted brand of suffering. Emma's fate, sealed in the confines of that closet, echoed through the hallowed halls of the courtroom, a silent witness to the horrors that had transpired. As the gavel fell, sealing Mercer's fate with a sentence devoid of reprieve, a whisper of triumph danced in the air. Lynette Porter's voice, a beacon of resilience in the face of adversity, echoed through the chamber, a declaration of victory over the shadows that had sought to consume her. The legacy of the case reverberated through the corridors of law enforcement, a cautionary tale of the darkness that lurked behind closed doors. Detective Shaw, her gaze fixed on the memento from Emma's apartment, carried the weight of the unseen scars etched into the fabric of reality, a reminder that sometimes the most harrowing stories are told in the silence of scratched walls. Story 25. The old house had sat silent and empty for what felt like an eternity. Whispers from the neighbors spoke of a young woman who vanished without a trace, leaving the place abandoned and frozen in time. But one fateful day, a new family arrived to breathe life back into its desolate rooms. As they explored their new home, a peculiar discovery awaited them in the bedroom. The door stood stubbornly locked from the inside, guarding secrets long forgotten. With determined hands, they forced it open, revealing a scene untouched by time. The air hung heavy with neglect, dust dancing in the faint light filtering through the curtains. Upon closer inspection, they noticed peculiar details that sent shivers down their spines. The bed was neatly made, the mirror gleaming without a speck of dust. A lone candle, its flame long extinguished, stood as a silent sentinel on the desk, its wax frozen in time like tears shed in solitude. But the most chilling find was the notebook left open, pages whispering a tale of mystery and sorrow. Detective Morgan delved into its depths, each word penned by the missing woman, Elise Winters, telling a story of fear and impending danger. Elise, a bright soul of 26, had vanished into the night, leaving behind a trail of cryptic entries hinting at unseen threats lurking in the shadows. Her meticulous handwriting painted a picture of a woman haunted by the specter of someone watching her every move, a paranoia that consumed her final days. As the investigation unfolded, a sinister truth began to emerge. Elise, once a diligent paralegal entangled in the web of a prestigious law firm, had stumbled upon dark secrets buried deep within the corporate world. Her pursuit of truth led her to a chilling discovery, a fabricated reality woven by powerful figures to conceal their sins. The room bore witness to her silent struggle, a battleground where justice clashed with deception. Despite the absence of physical evidence, the walls whispered of a crime long concealed, waiting to be unearthed by the relentless pursuit of truth. Forensic experts combed through the room, unraveling a tangled web of deceit woven by those who thought themselves untouchable. Hidden compartments revealed damning evidence of corruption, a trail of breadcrumbs leading to the heart of darkness that consumed Elise. Through a series of clandestine recordings and incriminating documents, the truth came to light, a tale of greed, manipulation, and the ultimate price paid for seeking justice in a world shrouded in shadows. The unraveling of the mystery led to the doorstep of Vincent Harriman, a man of power and privilege whose facade crumbled in the face of overwhelming evidence. His attempts to erase the past proved futile, as the room that bore witness to Elise's final moments stood as a silent testament to the truth she fought to expose. In a stunning turn of events, justice prevailed as Harriman's guilt was laid bare for all to see. The echoes of Elise's unwavering pursuit of truth resonated through the empty halls of the house, a legacy of courage and sacrifice that refused to be silenced. As night fell, casting a veil of darkness over the abandoned house, a flicker of light appeared in the upstairs window. Some claimed it was Elise's spirit, watching over the place where her story ended, a beacon of hope in a world where justice had the final say. The house remained a silent sentinel, a monument to a life lost but never forgotten. And as the winds of time whispered through its empty rooms, the ghosts of the past found solace in the knowledge that justice, though delayed, had finally found its way home. Story 26. The aged apartment held its secrets, pipes that murmured, floorboards that whispered, but the new tenant sensed a difference in the sounds that reached her ears. The footsteps, slow and steady, echoed from above, despite her living on the top floor. One night she summoned the courage to tap on the ceiling with a broomstick. The noise ceased. Silence enveloped the space. Then a single knock reverberated from inside the very ceiling. Sarah Coleman chose to keep the knocking encounter to herself, attributing it to the settling of the building or perhaps a small creature that had wandered into the attic. Despite the nightly continuation of the footsteps, she adjusted, increasing the volume of her television, wearing headphones to bed, anything to drown out the rhythmic footfalls that traversed her ceiling in the dark. Detective Morris's attention was drawn to the apartment when a maintenance worker stumbled upon a concealed crawlspace during routine repairs. While fixing a water leak in the hallway adjacent to Sarah's apartment, the worker uncovered a narrow passage that defied the building plans. Within this hidden space, illuminated by a flashlight, lay a makeshift living area, food remnants, water containers, a soiled blanket, and a small notebook. The building superintendent promptly contacted the police. Upon arrival, Detective Morris and his partner, Detective Rivera, encountered the pale, trembling maintenance worker. "Someone's been dwelling in the walls," he repeated frantically. Someone's been watching. The notebook contained meticulous observations of Sarah Coleman's daily life, her routines, visitors, meals, entertainment preferences, bathing times, and sleeping patterns. The handwriting, once precise, deteriorated into erratic scribbles on the final pages, with strange symbols adorning the margins. The subject no longer responds to my signals, the last entry read. She has chosen to ignore me. No one ignores me. Forensic teams meticulously combed the crawl space, uncovering fingerprints that matched no known records. They revealed a complex network of passageways integrated into the walls and ceilings of the building, some dating back decades. These passages linked to 5 different apartments, terminating in observation points, tiny apertures camouflaged as fixtures or minor damages solely in Sarah Coleman's dwelling. Current residents reported no unusual occurrences beyond typical apartment noises. However, former occupants painted a different picture. 3 prior tenants of Sarah's apartment confessed to feeling watched or hearing unexplained movements. 1 tenant had swiftly vacated after a mere fortnight. None had voiced their experiences, fearing ridicule for sounding paranoid. The breakthrough in the case emerged when forensic analysis detected minute blood splatters in one of the crawl spaces. DNA testing traced the spatter to Martin Weaver, a former resident who had vanished inexplicably 4 years prior. His disappearance had led to a cold missing persons case. Martin had resided directly beneath Sarah's apartment. Detective Morris revisited Martin's disappearance. Neighbors recalled Martin's grievances regarding noises emanating from above his apartment. He had confronted the tenant living above him at the time, an introverted man named Edward, who swiftly vanished following the confrontation. Investigators delved into Edward's rental history, unearthing a pattern of inhabiting top-floor units, maintaining minimal social interactions, and abrupt departures without notice. A neighbor from Edward's 3rd residence described him as intense, citing his frequent complaints about needing silence. Property records disclosed Edward's purchase of remote rural land. Upon investigation, a cabin was discovered, adorned with photos and notes, images of residents from various apartment buildings, detailed journals chronicling observations, and a corkboard displaying missing persons reports. 6 of the missing individuals were former residents of buildings where Edward had resided, their identities confirmed by forensic anthropologists. As investigators probed further, cadaver dogs led them to freshly disturbed earth behind the cabin, exposing multiple graves. The search for Edward, now identified as Edward Mercer, a former construction worker with expertise in renovations, remains ongoing. Thermal imaging scans of Sarah's building detected no signs of current habitation within the walls. Sarah Coleman, connected to similar disappearances in various states, remains missing. Detective Morris, haunted by the image of Sarah hearing those footsteps above her with no upstairs neighbor, sometimes finds himself listening intently to the silence of his own home at night. He gazes up at his ceiling, pondering, waiting, wondering who else might be listening in the darkness. Story 27, the tale of the peeling wallpaper unfolded like a whispered secret in the night. The new residents, Michael and Sarah Klein, believed it was a mere cosmetic flaw, a minor imperfection in their charming Victorian-era home. But as they delicately peeled back the layers, a haunting narrative began to reveal itself, written in ink upon the walls. In a dance of curiosity and unease, they uncovered a name repeated endlessly, Alina Winters. The name, etched in frantic strokes, seemed to pulse with a silent urgency, beckoning them to unravel its mysteries. It was a name not found in the house's documented past, a name lost to time until a digital search unearthed a chilling connection. A missing persons case from decades ago breathed life into the ghostly whispers of the walls. The face of Alina Winters, captured in a faded photograph, bore an uncanny resemblance to the woman who had passed on the keys to Michael and Sarah Margaret Cavendish, a name that now held layers of secrets waiting to be unfurled. As the Kleins delved deeper into the enigma, their home transformed from a sanctuary of old-world charm to a stage for a haunting mystery. Their evenings were no longer filled with the warmth of domesticity, but with the cold chill of unresolved questions lingering in the air. With each revelation, the boundaries of reality seemed to blur. Margaret Cavendish's existence became a mirage, a fleeting apparition that dissolved upon closer inspection. The past and present intertwined in a tangled web of deceit and longing, drawing the Kleins into a labyrinth of hidden truths. The walls, once silent witnesses to the passage of time, now bore the weight of a forgotten tragedy. Alina Winters' disappearance echoed through the decades, her story entwined with that of a woman fractured by the shadows of her own mind. As the investigation unfolded, hidden chambers were unearthed, revealing a trove of identities carefully crafted to mask a fractured psyche. Alina Winters and Margaret Cavendish, two sides of a fractured coin, separated by a veil of delusion spun by a mind teetering on the edge of madness. The truth, when finally unearthed, shattered the fragile peace of the Klein's dream home. Beneath the tranquil facade lay a tapestry of deception woven by a woman lost to her own illusions. The name on the wall, a mantra of desperation, whispered of a soul trapped in a prison of its own making. And as the final pieces of the puzzle fell into place, the garden yielded its own macabre secret, a truth buried deep within the earth, waiting to be exhumed. Alina Winters, long lost to the shadows, found her voice in the whispers of the wind, guiding the hands of justice to her long-awaited rest. The walls, once silent witnesses, now bore the scars of a tragedy laid bare. Rebecca Eldridge, the fractured soul behind the facade of Margaret Cavendish, stood at the precipice of truth and redemption, her fractured mind laid bare for all to see. And as the sun set on the once charming Victorian home, now forever marked by the echoes of a dark past, Michael and Sarah stood as witnesses to a tale that transcended time, a tale of walls that whispered secrets of the night, of names etched in ink that told a story of longing, loss, and ultimately redemption.